Welcome. You've arrived. Not by accident, but by something quiet within you. A longing, a weight, a question that didn't have words, until now. This is the empty boat. A place where stories drift slowly like fog over still water. Where the voice does not teach, but reminds. Where silence is not absence, but presence, deep and listening. Here we sit together. No past to fix, no future to chase, only breath. Only the soft unfolding of tales that heal, not with answers, but with space. So breathe. Set down your burdens, just for a while. Let the ripples of sound carry you inward. And as we begin the first of 25 Zen stories, let this moment be your return. To stillness, to self, to the boat that has no oars, because it was never lost. Welcome to the empty boat. Let us begin. Chapter 1, Roots of Verbal Karma, the Reflecting Mirror of the Mind. Part 1, The Buddha's Question. Why do we hurt with words? It was just before dawn when the monk asked the question. The old master sat by the window, pouring tea into a cracked ceramic cup. Rain fell outside in long silver threads, painting the temple courtyard in stillness. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. "Master," the young monk said, "why do people keep repeating the same hurtful things? The same words, the same pain, generation after generation, as if they don't see what they're doing." The master smiled faintly, watching a raindrop trail down the bamboo frame. Then he replied quietly, "Because they do not realize their words are mirrors, and they have never dared to look inside." That morning, the bell rang softer. Birds perched along the edge of the roof, shivering in the cold. The monks went on with their chores, but the question stayed in the novice's mind like the echo of a gong. We live surrounded by speech, yet so few ever pause to see that every word spoken is a trace of the speaker's mind. Not merely a sound, but an imprint. Not merely a reaction, but a karma. What is verbal karma? In Buddhist teachings, there are 3 types of karma: body, physical acts, speech, verbal acts, and mind, intentions and thoughts. Among these, verbal karma, or mouth karma, is the most underestimated. People believe that because words disappear into the air, they are harmless. But that is a dangerous illusion. Words carve into memory. They shape self-image. They define relationships. A slap can bruise for a day, but a cruel sentence can echo for a lifetime. Verbal karma is not just about what we say. It is also how we say it, why we say it, and what kind of mind is behind the voice. Even silence becomes karma when used to manipulate or punish. Why is speech as powerful as action? Because it is a form of action. To speak is to choose. To express a thought is to shape reality. Just as a seed turns into a tree, a phrase can become an entire destiny. A teacher says, "You're not talented." Years later, the student stops believing in themselves. A mother whispers, "You disappoint me." The child carries that wound into every adult relationship. A friend laughs, "You're too sensitive." And we begin to suppress our own heart. The mouth moves, but it is the mind that speaks. And what the mind repeats, it becomes. A story. 5 words each day. In a quiet neighborhood in Kyoto, there lived a woman named Haruko. She had been married for 12 years to a man named Kenji. He never hit her, never shouted, never cheated. He simply spoke. Each day, 5 times, softly. "You should lose weight." "Why can't you be more like my mother?" I earned the money, remember that. Don't be dramatic. You're lucky I'm still here. None of these phrases were shouted. They were spoken over breakfast, in passing, or before bed, calmly, repeatedly. Haruko never screamed back. She smiled. She cooked. She did everything right. Until one day, her hands began to shake while tying her hair. Then she stopped eating, then sleeping, then speaking. At the hospital, the psychiatrist said, "No bruises, no abuse." But a monk who came to visit sat by her bed and whispered, "What words do you still hear in the silence?" She wept. That night, she dreamed of herself as a child, standing in a field of cranes. Her mother's voice called out gently, and the girl in the dream smiled. It was the first smile in 6 years. The teaching: listen to your mind before you open your mouth. Speech is not neutral. Each word arises from a state of consciousness. Anger speaks differently than compassion. Fear speaks differently than understanding. Shame speaks differently than love. Before you speak, listen, not to the other, but to yourself. Ask, why am I saying this? What do I want this person to feel? Will this word bring clarity or confusion? Is this my pain speaking or my wisdom? In the silence between thought and speech, karma is born or dissolved. Zen reflection: the Buddha did not give commandments, he gave mirrors. When someone asked, "What should I say when I'm angry?" he said, "First, see the anger. Then you will not need to ask." Psychological insight: words are shadows of the inner world. Modern psychology confirms this ancient teaching. Words are not random, they are emotional fingerprints. Repetitive criticism often hides deep insecurity. Sarcasm masks hurt. Silence, weaponized, speaks of unhealed betrayal. Harshness comes from fear of vulnerability. People who hurt others with words are often wounded themselves. But healing begins not with blame, but with awareness. When we become aware of our own speech patterns, we begin to see the patterns of our mind. And once we see, truly see, change becomes possible. Closing meditation: breathing with compassion. Tonight, sit for a moment. Inhale slowly. Exhale softly. Recall one thing you said today that might have hurt. Not to punish, but to understand. Then recall something someone once said to you that still echoes. Breathe compassion into both. And whisper to yourself, "May my words be water for thirsty hearts." Then sleep. Let silence be your first teacher. Let mindfulness be your second. Let kindness be your voice. Part 2. What is verbal karma? Distinguishing wholesome and unwholesome speech. It is said in the ancient texts, "Of all the fires in the world, the fire of the tongue burns the deepest." In a forest temple far in the mountains of northern Laos, there lived an elderly nun named Sister Manira. She had taken the vow of silence for 40 years, not because she hated speech, but because she respected its power too deeply. She once whispered, "It is not that words are evil. It is that most people do not know how to carry fire without burning others." What is verbal karma? In the Pali Canon, the Buddha spoke often of vachi karma, verbal karma, as one of the 3 primary forms of human action. The others are kaya karma, bodily action, and mano karma, mental action. Among the 3, speech is the bridge between thought and deed. It is the middle stream. To speak is to give your mind a body. It is to take your invisible thoughts and make them audible, tangible, and impactful. Speech is action, and action generates karma. But verbal karma is subtler than physical acts. A punch can be seen and punished. A cruel sentence? It slips through legal systems, but it imprints on the nervous system. The 4 types of unwholesome speech. In the teachings, 4 types of harmful speech are classified as unwholesome karma. False speech, musavada, deliberate lying, deception, or misrepresentation. Divisive speech, pisunawacha, words that create conflict or separate people. Harsh speech, parusavacha, cruel, abusive, or insulting words. Idle chatter, sampapalapa, meaningless talk, gossip, and noise. Each of these seeds a different kind of suffering. Lies fracture trust. Divisive talk breeds suspicion. Harshness creates trauma. Idle words drown clarity. But what makes them karmic is not just the word, but the intention behind the word. A parent may shout to save a child from danger. A doctor may give painful news with compassion. These are not unwholesome speech. They are necessary truths wrapped in mindful presence. Wholesome speech, seeds of healing. The opposite of these are truthful, unifying, gentle, and purposeful speech. When we speak truthfully, we build trust. When we unify, we restore. When we are gentle, we soften pain. When we speak with purpose, we uplift. In the suttas, the Buddha described wholesome speech as spoken at the right time, spoken in truth, spoken affectionately, spoken beneficially, spoken with a mind of goodwill. That is the measure. To speak not only for correctness, but also for kindness. The story of the broken son and the restored voice. There was a man named Osamu in Nagano. His father, Kazuo, had served in the military, raised his sons with rigid order, and never once said, "I'm proud of you." Not once. Osamu, though successful, lived with a hunger that no salary could fill. His heart was haunted by the absence of 4 words. I am proud of you. After his father's stroke, the old man lost much of his mobility. Osamu cared for him, changed his clothes, fed him, even read him books, but the words never came. One rainy evening, Osamu, exhausted and bitter, whispered aloud beside the hospital bed, "You know, I never needed money. I just needed your voice to say something that wasn't an order." His father blinked, unable to speak. 2 weeks later, the old man died. But before he did, he wrote shakily on the back of a prescription slip, "I was proud. I just never learned how to say it." The note was only 8 words. But to Osamu, it was a voice from beyond death, a karma released, a cycle broken. Why is this karma? Because the words left unspoken can sometimes wound as deeply as those that are said. And the words finally released, truthfully, lovingly, can heal generations. The psychological mirror. Modern science shows that the brain cannot distinguish between emotional injury and physical injury. Words of rejection activate the same pain receptors in the brain as a broken arm. A harsh insult creates a neural scar. Constant criticism shapes the self-identity. Repetitive shaming leads to anxiety and low self-worth. Unspoken validation leads to emotional starvation. Verbal karma in neuroscience is not metaphor, it is neurology. This is why spiritual healing must involve mindful speech. It is not enough to meditate alone in silence. One must purify speech as well to truly transform. Practice the 3 gates of speech. Before you speak, pass your words through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If your words cannot walk through all 3, let them sit quietly at the door. Because silence spoken with love is wiser than speech carried by ego. Meditation, breathing with the voice. Sit in silence. Place your hand on your chest. Inhale. Ask, what word am I about to say that carries tension? Exhale. Let it dissolve. Let only that which carries compassion, truth, and clarity arise. The wind beneath the sutra. At the temple of Suan Muk in Thailand, there's a carved wooden plaque that reads, "Words are born from your breath, so breathe slowly, speak slowly, heal slowly." This is not poetry, it is a map, a path through the dense forest of karmic speech. As we walk it slowly, we begin to hear a new kind of silence. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of understanding. Final reflection. Not every word needs to be spoken. Not every truth needs to be loud. Not every silence is empty. Verbal karma is the most accessible path to liberation. It meets you every day, in traffic, at dinner, on the phone, in conflict. And with each word, you are either planting peace or watering suffering. Choose well. Speak as if each word could become your legacy, because it will. Part 3. Why are words as powerful as deeds? At the edge of a rice field in a small Vietnamese village, there once lived a healer named Ba Hien. She was not trained in medicine, nor in any formal tradition. But people came from miles away just to hear her speak. Not because she gave advice, but because her words made people feel seen. A widow said, "Her words removed the cold from my chest." A thief said, "Her voice made me weep without shame." A soldier said, "She didn't tell me what I was, she reminded me who I forgot I was." No herbs, no rituals, just her presence and her way of speaking. What makes words so powerful? If we measure the strength of an action by its impact, then few actions are more potent than speech. Think of it. A sentence can start a war. A phrase can save a life. A whisper can dissolve years of hatred. A rumor can destroy a reputation beyond repair. Words are energy. Once released, they ripple. And while the mouth moves for only a second, the effects of its movement can echo for decades. In the Dhammapada, it is written, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." Words are not ideas, they are instruments. When used with wisdom, they restore. When used in ignorance, they scar. The story of the man who never hit his son. Toshinori was a strict father. He never laid a hand on his son, Koji. Never yelled, never cursed. But every time Koji shared his feelings, his father would respond, "Don't be weak. You think emotions matter in this world? Men don't cry. Get up." Over time, Koji became hard, then silent, then unreachable. As an adult, he couldn't maintain relationships. He could not say, "I love you," without choking. He once confessed to a therapist, "No one ever beat me, but I feel like I've been broken in half all my life." It wasn't fists that shattered him. It was cold sentences, repeated like a mantra, words that denied his inner world. And it was only after reading an old poem in a Zen monastery that Koji cried for the first time in 20 years. If a child cries, let the cry pass through you like wind through bamboo. But do not shut the window. Let him know there is someone inside. That poem became his new voice, his new breath, his first act of healing. Words as deeds, the neuroscience. In modern neuroscience, words are considered sensory experiences. The brain registers spoken language not only through cognitive processing, but also through emotional response systems. Words activate the limbic system, particularly the amygdala when perceived as threatening. Regulate cortisol and stress hormones depending on their tone. Can strengthen or weaken neural pathways, especially in children. In fact, repeated verbal abuse has been shown to shrink the hippocampus, memory, distort emotional regulation, create chronic anxiety responses. So when spiritual teachings say words are actions, they are not exaggerating. They are biologically correct. Words that heal, words that kill. In hospitals, doctors often underestimate their speech. A doctor once told a cancer patient, "You probably have 6 months." The man died in 5, hopeless, bitter, resigned. Another doctor told a patient, "Let's walk through this together. I won't promise, but I will stay beside you." The patient cried, not from fear, but because someone didn't abandon him. The difference wasn't medicine, it was language. Words may not cure disease, but they can ignite or extinguish the will to live. The karma of words in the digital age. Today, words travel faster than ever. One post, one comment, one headline. And behind screens, people forget the weight of what they say. Anonymity breeds cruelty. Irony becomes a mask for contempt. Teenagers end their lives because of words typed by strangers. The Buddha taught mindfulness in the forest. Now we must practice it online. Before pressing send, ask, would I say this to someone's face? Does this help or harm? Is this truth or my pain wearing a costume? Speech karma has evolved, but the principle remains unchanged. What you release, you become responsible for. The whisper of regret. An elderly woman named Ruth lived alone in Kyoto. Her daughter hadn't visited in 5 years. One day, while dusting her photo frames, Ruth whispered, "I should not have said those things to you that day." No one heard her. But in that whisper was a world, a collapse, a longing. The last time they spoke, Ruth had said, "You're not my daughter anymore if you leave that husband." Her daughter left and never came back. Ruth told her cat, her teacups, the sky, "I was wrong." But the apology never reached the person it was meant for. That is the tragedy of unskillful speech. Sometimes it outruns our ability to take it back. The teaching. Words are moral acts. Every word you speak is an act of ethics. Not just truth or lie, but does this elevate or degrade? Does it bring harmony or separation? Does it awaken or numb? Speech is compassion in syllables or ego in camouflage. You don't need a temple to practice. You just need a mouth and a pause. Zen anecdote. The monk's single sentence. A novice once asked his teacher, "Master, what is the most powerful form of karma?" The master replied, "Words, because they echo longer than footsteps and cut deeper than knives." Practice. Speak only when necessary. When speaking, slow your breath first. Before giving advice, ask, do I know their pain or only my opinion? After a conversation, reflect, did my words build something? This practice isn't about silence. It's about refining speech into an offering. Final reflection. The wind does not apologize for moving leaves, but you are not the wind. You are the steward of language. You carry the weight of meaning. And the people around you, friends, family, strangers, will remember not only what you said, but how they felt in your presence. Words are not filler between thoughts. They are threads in the fabric of our shared humanity. So speak as though you are weaving peace, because you are. Part 4. The story of the wife hurt by 5 small sentences each day. In a small village just outside Nara, nestled among persimmon trees and early autumn wind, lived a woman named Amy. She was not extraordinary in the eyes of the world. She did not seek fame nor protest her fate. To the neighbors, she was the quiet wife of a local government clerk. She kept her garden neat, she bowed politely, she smiled when spoken to. But inside her home, and even deeper within her body, lived a quiet ache. Not from violence, not from betrayal, but from 5 words, repeated every day for 20 years. The quiet nature of verbal wounds. When people hear of suffering, they often expect dramatic stories, shouting, slamming doors, the sharp sting of insults. But the pain Emmy carried was built of whispers, of routine remarks, of sentences spoken while pouring tea, folding towels, or setting down chopsticks. Her husband, Hiroshi, was a man who believed himself kind. He paid the bills. He never raised his hand. He did not drink or cheat. But each morning, as he adjusted his tie, he would say, "Try not to embarrass me today." At lunch, if she shared an idea, "You always overthink things." If she forgot to replace a broken light bulb, "Can't you even manage simple tasks?" When he scrolled through his phone at night, "Why don't you learn to be more interesting?" And just before bed, "You're lucky I've stayed with you this long." They were not shouted. They were not dramatic, but they were bricks. And every day they were placed one by one on Amy's spirit. The slow erosion. At first, Amy would laugh nervously. "He doesn't mean it. I shouldn't take it personally. He's just tired." But with time, she began to shrink. She spoke less, stopped reading novels, stopped painting, stopped visiting her cousin. She began to believe what he said, that she was a burden, that she was not smart, that she was plain, that she was, perhaps, truly lucky he hadn't left. That is the power of speech. It doesn't need to strike. It only needs to repeat. The turning point. One spring morning, Emmy was walking home from the temple market, carrying fresh ginger and mushrooms. A young woman, no more than 20, passed by with a child in her arms. The child dropped a toy. The young woman turned and said softly, "That's okay, sweetheart, I've got you." Something in Emmy's chest tightened. She remembered nothing cruel. She remembered nothing at all. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not her father, not her mother, certainly not her husband. No voice had ever said, "I've got you." She stood frozen for nearly a full minute, and then she began to cry. Right there, in front of the temple gate. Not because of sadness, but because of the realization that her whole life had been lived in a drought of kindness. The teacher who heard without advice. Later that week, Emmy visited a Zen temple on the outskirts of town. She told no one. She simply arrived and asked to sit in the back of the meditation hall. There, she met an old nun, Sister Tazuko. The nun asked no questions. But after the final bell, as the hall emptied, Sister Tazuko approached Emmy and said, "You do not look broken, but your spirit is trying to remember what kindness sounds like." Emmy wept again, but this time without shame. That single sentence was the first time in decades Someone saw what she herself couldn't name. Not abuse, not depression, but the quiet erosion of identity through unkind repetition. Verbal karma without malice. Many people think karma arises only from cruel intentions. But Hiroshi, Emi's husband, was not cruel in the traditional sense. He did not set out to harm her. But he had never examined his words. He had never questioned his tone. He had been raised by a father who believed love was control, who equated kindness with weakness, who praised only achievement. And so Hiroshi became a man who confused dominance with stability. His karma was not born from hatred, it was born from ignorance. But the effects were the same. Karma cares not whether the fire was set intentionally, only that it burns. The healing begins. After 3 months of quiet visits to the temple, Emi began to change. She read poetry aloud to herself again. She painted a single wisteria flower on her kitchen wall. She said no when she meant no. And one night, when Hiroshi said his usual bedtime sentence, "You're lucky I've stayed with you this long," Emi did not respond. She simply turned off the light and whispered, "I was never lucky, only quiet." It was not a confrontation. It was an awakening. The Buddhist teaching, seeds and soil. The Buddha taught that every word is a seed. But the soil is not always the world. Sometimes the soil is a heart. And when words are repeated daily, even the smallest seeds take root. If your words are laced with contempt, seeds of self-doubt grow. If they are soaked in fear, seeds of hesitation bloom. But if your words carry even one drop of mindful love, they grow into courage, into presence, into peace. Modern psychology, the subtle abuse. In therapeutic terms, what Emi experienced is known as covert verbal abuse. Not overt aggression, but undermining, chronic criticism, gaslighting of perception, a slow undoing of confidence. Because there are no bruises, it is rarely spoken of, but its damage is often deeper and longer lasting than physical harm. Victims of this pattern often suffer anxiety without known source, chronic people-pleasing, emotional numbness, difficulty expressing needs, shame around their own feelings. The first step to healing, as with Emi, is recognition. To name what was once unnamed. To stop calling harm normal. To remember what kindness sounds like. Reflection practice. The 5 daily sentences. Take 5 minutes each night. Ask yourself, what was the first sentence I said to someone today? What was the last? Did any sentence cause someone to shrink? Did any sentence invite someone to breathe deeper? If someone remembered me only through my words today, what kind of memory would I become? Let this practice guide your speech, not to perfection, but to awareness. Zen whisper. Not all pain screams. Some pain lives in quiet grammar. Zen saying scratched into a bench in a rural Korean temple. Final image. Today, Emi teaches calligraphy to children in her village. Each stroke she teaches begins with the same instruction. Breathe. Speak the word in your heart before you write it on the page. And sometimes, when a child looks unsure, she kneels beside them and says, "You are enough, just as you are. I've got you." Because she knows that even one sentence, if repeated with love, can rewrite a life. Part 5. The lesson. Listen to the mind before you speak. In the snowy courtyard of a mountain monastery, a novice monk once asked his teacher, "Master, how can I stop speaking words that hurt?" The teacher, an old man with eyes like still water, turned his head slowly and pointed to the winter pine. "Do you hear the snow falling from the branches?" The novice listened. The forest was silent. "I hear nothing, master." "Exactly," the teacher replied. "That's because snow does not fall in anger. It falls when it's time. It listens to its own weight first." The monk bowed in silence. He would remember that moment for the rest of his life. Words begin before the mouth opens. The truth is, we never speak accidentally. Yes, we may speak unconsciously. Yes, we may regret our tone or timing. But every word arises from a chain of inner events: a sensation, a thought, an emotion, a judgment, a story, a belief. By the time a word escapes our lips, it has already traveled a great distance through our experiences, traumas, assumptions, and expectations. That's why true mindful speech begins not with silence, but with self-inquiry. The mind before the mouth, a forgotten gateway. If you pause before speaking, not just to calculate your phrasing, but to truly listen to your internal weather, you open a doorway to transformation. Ask yourself, is this thought coming from fear, love, pride, or pain? Am I about to defend myself or connect? Do I need to be right or do I need to be kind? Will this word move us forward or just prove a point? These aren't rhetorical questions. They are a gate, and only awareness holds the key. The story of the shopkeeper and the elder. In a bustling district of Osaka, there was a small tea shop known for its bitter matcha and quiet atmosphere. The owner, Haruto, was known to be efficient but curt. He rarely smiled, spoke little, and often dismissed small talk with a grunt. One afternoon, an elderly customer spilled her tea by accident. "Oh, my hands," she said softly, embarrassed. Haruto, without looking up, muttered, "Maybe you shouldn't drink alone if you can't hold a cup." The old woman said nothing. She simply bowed and left, leaving her unfinished pastry behind. That night, Haruto couldn't sleep. Something gnawed at him, not guilt, but an odd silence in his chest. He dreamed of a withered hand releasing a cup and the sound of porcelain breaking on hardwood. The next morning, he visited the local Zen temple. The monk listened to Haruto's confession and replied, "You spoke not to her weakness, but to your own impatience, and you disguised it as practicality." That sentence struck Haruto harder than any rebuke. He had not meant harm, but he had spoken from irritation, not from presence. His words, though efficient, had bruised a tender soul. From that day forward, he placed a note beside his teapot that read, "Breathe, then speak." Listening is the first noble act. Many spiritual traditions teach silence as a form of discipline, but silence without listening is just withholding. The real art lies in listening inwardly, even in the space between sentences. When someone speaks to you, do you pause to feel their intention or plan your response? Do you register their pain or filter it through your judgment? Do you mirror them or do you truly see them? To listen well is to speak well before a word is ever spoken. The psychological insight. Self-talk as training ground. Therapists often say, the way you speak to yourself is the way you'll speak to others. If your inner voice is critical, rushed, harsh, shame-driven, then your spoken voice will echo that pattern, especially in moments of stress. We must therefore begin with ourselves. Notice how you speak internally after a mistake. Listen to your tone when you're alone. Hear the stories you tell about yourself. Every moment of self-talk is a rehearsal for outer communication. You cannot pour compassion into others if your own cup is cracked by cruelty. Zen teaching: say less, mean more. A wandering monk once asked an old Zen master, "What's the best advice you've ever received about speaking?" The master replied, "Say only what you can live with tomorrow." The monk frowned. "But how do I know which words those are?" The master smiled. "You'll know by how quiet your heart feels after you say them." Daily practice: the breath between thought and speech. This is a simple but powerful exercise. Before speaking, take one full breath. Scan your body. Is your jaw tight? Chest tense? Eyes narrowed? Scan your mind. Is there defensiveness, insecurity, a need to control? Scan your intention. Is this about connection or release of pressure? Then speak. If your voice carries more clarity than confusion, repeat again and again until it becomes a rhythm, a new reflex, a new karma. The healing power of one pause. A mother once told her teenage son, in the heat of an argument, "You're just like your father, selfish and cold." She didn't mean it. She was overwhelmed, exhausted. But the damage was done. The boy didn't speak to her for weeks. At a parenting retreat, the mother broke down in tears and said, "If I had just taken one breath." The teacher replied, "Yes, that one breath is the difference between a wound and a window." Compassion as the default voice. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to speak only when enlightened. You only need to cultivate this: compassion as your default voice, curiosity instead of assumption, kind honesty instead of brutal truth, boundaries without aggression. Each time you pause, breathe, and speak from that place, you shift the field around you. And over time, your presence becomes its own healing language. Closing reflection. Tonight, sit with the moments when your words felt sharp, not to shame yourself, but to see, was there a moment I could have paused? Was the voice inside me rushed, angry, lonely? Could I have said less and meant more? Now sit with a moment when your words brought comfort. What was different? What was the state of your heart? Let that be your teacher. Let it guide your voice tomorrow. Because words are never neutral. They either awaken or wound. Let yours awaken. Zen quote: "Speak as if your words must pass through the ears of the one you love most, because they always will." Part 1. It's useless anyway. The mindset of surrender. The old man sat on the stone steps of the temple, head bowed low, hands trembling as he rolled the edge of his faded sleeve between two fingers. The sun had just dipped beneath the horizon, and the lanterns in the trees were beginning to glow, one by one. He had come alone. He had no questions, only a single phrase repeated under his breath, like a broken chant. It's useless anyway. It's useless anyway. The most dangerous sentence. Among all forms of harmful speech, the most deceptive is the one disguised as resignation. It doesn't shout. It doesn't curse. It doesn't accuse. But it kills quietly from the inside out. It's useless anyway. Why try? Nothing will change. No one listens. What's the point? These phrases do not cut others directly, but they poison the speaker's own spirit slowly and thoroughly. This is the karma of surrender, spoken into existence, reinforced by repetition, and often mistaken for wisdom. The story of Takumi the Gardener. Takumi was once known in his village for growing the finest chrysanthemums in 3 provinces. His garden had been visited by monks, artists, even a small royal delegation. But then came the flood. One night of heavy rain broke the river's bank, and his life's work was destroyed in an hour. When the villagers came to visit him, he sat beside the ruined field, staring blankly. They offered seeds, tools, even help rebuilding. But Takumi only said, "It's useless anyway." He repeated it to his neighbors. He repeated it to himself. He repeated it for the next 10 years. He never planted again. Not because he lost his hands, but because he had convinced his tongue to bury his will. Hopelessness as karma. According to Buddhist teachings, every thought and word either reinforces delusion or awakens truth. Hopelessness, when verbalized repeatedly, becomes a karmic loop. We suffer loss or failure. We interpret it as total futility. We speak this futility aloud. The words become our new identity. We stop acting, believing, or opening. Our reality mirrors this inner closure. More disappointment follows. The loop begins again. The statement, "It's useless anyway," becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Not because the world is cruel, but because we have trained our mind to expect nothing but cruelty. And expectation, in spiritual terms, shapes perception. Psychological insight, learned helplessness. Modern psychology calls this phenomenon learned helplessness. Coined by Martin Seligman, the term describes a condition in which individuals, after repeated exposure to uncontrollable negative events, begin to believe they are powerless, even when future opportunities for change arise. This belief then becomes a habit of thought, a posture of the body, a tone in speech, a decline in action. They no longer try, because trying feels foolish, painful, or embarrassing. In therapy rooms, phrases like, "I'm just not that kind of person," "I always fail at this," "No one ever understands me," "Things don't work out for people like me," are not merely reflections of past experience. They are scripts, internalized, rehearsed, and spoken into being. And as long as the script is performed, the story cannot change. Spiritual wisdom, speech as seed, not summary. The Buddha did not dismiss suffering, but he never allowed speech to crystallize despair. When a disciple cried, "I am broken," the Buddha replied, "You are not broken. You are the river that thinks it is the stone." In other words, your words are not your truth. They are only a snapshot of the current mind state. Speak them with care. Do not mistake today's fog for the death of the sun. The danger of being realistic. Sometimes people defend their despair with the word realism. I'm just being realistic. This is how the world is. Dreams are for children. But Zen reminds us, what you call realism may actually be the residue of past wounds. It is not clarity, it is caution. Not objectivity, but armor. A man who was once ridiculed for singing may say, "Music is useless." A woman who once loved deeply and was betrayed may say, "Love doesn't exist." These are not truths. They are trauma stories turned into language. The first step of healing is not disproving these thoughts. It is simply refusing to speak them as if they are final. The woman who planted anyway. At the edge of a war-torn town in northern Myanmar, a woman named Ai Thandar lived with her 2 children. Her husband had died in the conflict. Her house had collapsed. Her savings were gone. But every morning, she walked to a dry patch of land behind the school and planted something. One seed, sometimes only one. People laughed at her. "It won't grow. There's no water. You should give up." I smiled softly. Then one day, a child asked her, "Why do you keep planting if it's useless?" She answered, "Because if I speak only of drought, my soul forgets rain." 3 years later, her patch had become a garden. Not because she had hope, but because she refused to let despair speak more loudly than care. The mind before the sentence. The sentence, "It's useless anyway," often arrives before we're aware of it. But if we slow down, we can see what lies beneath it. Fear of disappointment, protection against vulnerability, old grief still ungrieved, internalized voices of the past. And once we recognize these roots, we can ask, is this truly useless or just difficult? Am I afraid of failure or of feeling failure again? Is there even a 5% chance that trying is worthwhile? What if the act itself is meaningful, even without success? Questions like these begin to rewire the tongue, from the tool of retreat into the doorway of renewal. Practice. Replace the sentence. Each time you catch yourself saying, "It's useless anyway," pause and replace it with one of the following. "This is hard, but not impossible." "Today is heavy. I'll try again tomorrow." Maybe the outcome is uncertain, but the effort still matters. I'm allowed to try, even without guarantees. Even if it fails, at least it came from love. Let your tongue learn a new rhythm. Let your mind hear different music. Meditation. Breathing with possibility. Sit with your spine upright. Place one hand on your chest, one on your belly. Inhale slowly. Say internally, "There is still air." Exhale gently. Say, "There is still life." Now recall a moment you gave up without trying. Then visualize yourself trying, gently, without expectation. Breathe again. Let go of the word useless. Replace it with maybe. That is enough. Final reflection. Hopelessness is not a truth. It is a visitor, persistent but impermanent. Every time we say it's useless, we build a wall around the light. But every time we refuse to say it, or say something more loving instead, we leave the window open, just a crack. And sometimes that's all the dawn needs. Part 2. It's their fault. The karma of blame and the illusion of innocence. There was once a villager named Gen in the mountain province of Akita. His farm failed after a long drought. His marriage unraveled. His oldest son refused to take over the land. Each time he came to the temple, Gen sat on the stone bench near the bell and said the same sentence. "If they had helped me sooner, if they had listened, I wouldn't be here." The old abbot would nod politely and say nothing. Until one day, Gen asked him directly, "Why do you never say a word when I speak?" The abbot finally replied, "Because if I answered, you'd blame me too." Blame feels like power, but it's a cage. Blame is seductive. It gives us a temporary illusion of clarity. It gives shape to suffering. It spares us the discomfort of self-inquiry. And most of all, it protects the ego. When we say, "It's their fault," we are really saying, "I was helpless. I was pure. I was the one wronged." Sometimes that's true. But even when harm is done to us, clinging to blame past its truth becomes its own karma. Because the moment blame hardens into identity, we surrender our inner power. The spiritual law of reflection. In Buddhism, paccaya means dependent co-arising. No event arises in isolation. In this view, reality is a web, not a straight line. If a tree falls, it is not only the wind's fault. It is also the weakness of the roots, the loosened soil, the dryness of the air, the age of the trunk. Likewise, when pain arises, there may be others' actions that contributed, but there is also our own expectation, our silence, our clinging, our unhealed wound. The Buddha never denied injustice, but he warned, even if you are struck unjustly, let your tongue not strike again. Why? Because the second strike belongs to you, and what you repeat, internally or aloud, becomes your karma, not theirs. The story of the daughter who waited for an apology. May was 32 when her father died. They had not spoken in 6 years. He had been a stern man, demanding, controlling, often silent when she needed warmth. May carried this pain like an heirloom. She told her friends, "He never said sorry. I waited my whole life." After the funeral, she returned home and found a drawer filled with postcards. They were never sent. Each had one line, "I'm sorry for the way I loved you." Me collapsed in grief, not just for the lost apology, but for the years spent holding her breath waiting for it. The karma of unreleased blame. Blame becomes toxic when it lasts longer than the wound itself. It replaces healing with righteousness. It becomes a shield against vulnerability. It turns the past into a monument, not a teacher. And speech is the mirror of that karma. We blame in subtle ways. Well, if she hadn't done that, I wouldn't be this way if. People like that always. They made me. I was never given a choice. These phrases are not just reactions. They are rehearsals of powerlessness. And what we rehearse, we become. Psychological insight, projection, and preservation. In modern psychology, blame often emerges from projection, a defense mechanism in which we assign to others what we cannot face in ourselves. A controlling parent may blame their child for being difficult. A resentful partner may accuse the other of being selfish. A person with guilt may project that guilt as external unfairness. Why? Because blame protects self-image. To take responsibility, even 10%, requires ego death. It requires humility. It requires saying, maybe I had a part in this. And for many, that is harder than the pain itself. Blame as delayed healing. There is a Tibetan saying, blame is a warm stone. It cools your hands but burns your skin. Blame feels good in the moment. It justifies our rage. It earns us sympathy. It preserves our sense of justice. But over time, it freezes the heart. People who hold long blame often struggle with forgiveness, recreate similar relationships, repeat the same patterns, retell the same stories, stay trapped in the wound narrative. And their speech reflects it, shaped not by presence, but by a past they won't let go of. The Zen practice, from blame to balance. In Zen, the practice is not to excuse others, but to ask, what was my part in this story? What expectation was I clinging to? What old wound was triggered? What action, even now, is possible? This is not self-blame. It is self-liberation. Because as long as your suffering is in someone else's hands, you are powerless. The moment you reclaim any piece of the narrative, you begin to write a new one. The farmer's conversation with the sky. An old Zen parable tells of a farmer who shouted at the sky after a ruined harvest. "You gave too much sun. You gave no rain. You gave me nothing." The wind whispered, "What did you plant?" The farmer stopped. He had planted nothing that year, expecting a miracle. In blaming the sky, he had hidden from his own inaction. So he bowed to the wind and began again. Practical exercise, the blame pause. Each time you catch yourself speaking a blaming phrase, pause. Ask, what feeling is beneath this blame? Fear? Shame? Anger? Is there a small part of this situation I can own, even 5%? What action, however small, is still in my power? Then speak from that place. Not to erase blame, but to balance it with awareness. The story you speak becomes the life you live. People often wonder why they stay stuck, why the same patterns repeat. But when you ask them to tell their story, it's the same every time. They always, he never, if only she hadn't, I'm this way because. The words never change, and so neither does the outcome. The Buddha taught that we are not our stories, but our stories shape our becoming. If you keep speaking like a victim, you will feel like one. If you speak like a prisoner, you will act like one. But if you speak like someone who is waking up, even before you believe it fully, the seeds of freedom will begin to grow. Meditation, the mirror of the tongue. Sit quietly. Let the breath come and go. Now visualize someone you blame. Not to justify or forgive, just to see. Ask, what did I expect from them? What did I lose? What belief about myself did their action trigger? Now place your hand on your heart and whisper, I release what no longer needs to be rehearsed. Let the next breath carry that release outward, not for their sake, but for yours. Final reflection. Blame feels like a sword, but often we are the ones who bleed longest. Your words matter. What you repeat about yourself, your past, your pain, becomes the path you walk. So choose the path that ends in truth, and let your tongue stop repeating the story that keeps you lost. Part 3. Someone else will do it. The illusion of dependence and the weakening of will. The bell rang at dawn, as it always did, but no one rose to sweep the meditation hall. No one lit the incense. No one filled the water urn. Each monk had assumed someone else would do it. And when the abbot arrived, he simply stood in the untended room, smiling. Then he spoke. The moment we expect others to carry the sacred, we abandon our own sanctity. The subtle poison of passive speech. In every society, home, workplace, and spiritual community, there are people who repeat a quiet but dangerous mantra. Someone else will fix it. They'll figure it out. This isn't my role. It's not my responsibility. Surely someone's taking care of it. On the surface, these sentences seem harmless. They do not insult. They do not blame. They sound polite, even deferential. But beneath them lies a deeper truth. They reveal a mind that has disconnected from agency, a spirit that has handed away its voice, a soul that has forgotten its strength. Dependence masquerading as peacefulness. Zen does not equate silence with wisdom, and it certainly does not confuse passivity with humility. There is a form of spiritual laziness that hides behind gentle words. I'm sure the universe has a plan. I'm not the right person to do this. It's not my place to speak. Sometimes these are true, but often they are camouflage for fear. Fear of stepping forward, fear of criticism, fear of getting it wrong, fear of effort itself. The sentence, someone else will do it, becomes a mantra of surrender, not to the divine, but to avoidance. The story of Hana and the crying child. In a quiet temple in Hokkaido, a laywoman named Hana visited regularly to help in the kitchen. One day, during a ceremony, a toddler began crying loudly in the corner. The mother tried to hush the child but failed. Hana turned and saw 5 other women looking at the scene. She thought, "Someone will go comfort the child." Minutes passed. The crying continued. The child became red-faced, trembling. Still, no one moved. After the service, the mother wept softly in the garden. No one had approached her, not to help, not to ask, not even to smile. Later that evening, Hana sat with the head nun and said, "I thought surely someone else would." The nun interrupted gently. Yes, and in that thought, 5 women abandoned one mother. The karma of inaction. Buddhism teaches that inaction can carry karma equal to harmful action. This is known as akusala, unwholesome behavior due to omission, ignorance, or indifference. When we repeatedly say, "Someone else will speak up," "Someone else will help," "Someone else will take initiative," we train the mind into bystander consciousness. And over time, we lose our edge, our clarity, and even our compassion. Not because we intend harm, but because we stop acting at all. Psychological insight. Diffusion of responsibility. Modern psychology has long studied the bystander effect. This phenomenon reveals that the more people present during a crisis, the less likely any one individual is to take action. Why? Because each person assumes someone else will step forward. This diffusion of responsibility is a cognitive illusion. It gives the appearance of a functioning group, while in reality, no one is accountable. This is how injustices are ignored, opportunities are missed, families fracture in silence, workplaces rot from disengagement. And all the while, people say, "I thought someone else was handling it." Speech as self-contracting. Every time we say "someone else will," we shrink the boundary of our own soul. We become narrower, quieter, less alive. Even monks who chant daily can fall into this passivity. Repeating sutras with no conviction, sweeping only when watched, smiling only when expected. Zen calls this dead speech, sound without awareness. And it is the sister of passive karma. The woman who finally spoke. In a town hall in Kyoto, an elderly woman named Noriko had attended meetings for 15 years. She had witnessed corruption, mismanagement, unfair treatment. But she never said a word. "I'm just an old lady," she would tell herself. "Others will speak, younger people, stronger people." One day, her neighbor was evicted unfairly, a single mother with 3 children. Noriko watched from her balcony. And for the first time, her inner voice said not, "Someone else will," but, "If not me, then who?" She stood at the next meeting and spoke. Her voice trembled. Her grammar broke. But that night, a dozen neighbors came to thank her. It turned out they had all been waiting for someone else. Practice, the mirror of action. Every time you think someone else will do it, pause. Ask, why not me? What am I afraid will happen if I act? What values do I compromise when I remain still? What small gesture is in my power right now? Then act, even in miniature. A note, a touch, a word, a broom. Every action done consciously is a counter-curse to the spell of apathy. Zen teaching, the one-straw revolution. A famous farmer philosopher, Masanobu Fukuoka, once said, "The healing of the world begins with a single straw of rice." It is not about grand heroism. It is about showing up, not outsourcing the sacred. Even Buddha began alone, walking barefoot, bowl in hand, without a crowd behind him. He did not wait for someone else. Inner dialogue, breaking the spell. When you hear yourself say, "They'll handle it. It's not my fight. I'm not qualified. I don't want to offend. I'm sure someone else will." Say back, gently but firmly, "And what if they don't? And what if I am enough?" Let the voice of responsibility begin inside you, not with pressure, not with guilt, but with presence. Meditation, breathing into ownership. Sit quietly. Inhale slowly. Whisper to yourself, "I am not too small to act. I am not too late to speak. I do not need perfection to contribute." Exhale. Let go of waiting. Inhale. Let your will return. Final reflection. The world is not held up by giants. It is held up by those who stopped waiting. Those who picked up the fallen cup. Who made the first phone call. Who asked, "How are you, really?" Who showed up without being asked. So speak not the words that shrink you. Speak the words that call you into responsibility, into alignment, into your rightful size. Because no one else can be you. And sometimes the one you were waiting for was yourself. Part 4. I told you so. Attachment to the past and the need to be right. The young monk entered the abbot's quarters with a frustrated look. "They didn't listen," he said. "Now the mistake has happened, just like I warned." The abbot, sitting beside a withering bonsai, did not respond. "I told them exactly what would go wrong, and now they ask for help." The abbot poured tea, slowly. Then he said, "A warning given in wisdom is noble, but a warning clung to in pride becomes poison." The monk blinked. And for the first time, his silence lasted longer than his anger. The hidden sting of "I told you so." On its surface, the phrase sounds simple, even justified. "I told you not to trust her. I warned you about this. I saw this coming. If you had listened to me, now do you believe me?" But beneath the tone lies a hunger, not for understanding, not for connection, but for validation. "I told you so" is often a bid for superiority, a subtle declaration that says, "I knew better. I was right. You should have followed me. You were foolish not to trust me." It is a phrase that disguises ego as insight. The karma of clinging to being right. In Buddhist psychology, one of the most dangerous delusions is attachment to view. Not just having a belief, but being entangled with it, needing to defend it, building identity around it. When we attach our self-worth to being right, then any disagreement feels like an attack. And when we are proven correct, instead of feeling peace, we feel triumph over the other person's mistake. "I told you so" becomes a sword sharpened with memory. But that sword wounds more than it protects. The story of the sister who couldn't let go. Aya and her younger sister Miki had always been close. Until Miki married a man Aya didn't trust. "He's selfish," Aya warned. "He'll hurt you." Years passed. Miki stayed silent about the troubles in her marriage. Until one night, she arrived at Aya's door with a suitcase and tear-streaked cheeks. Aya opened the door, and the first thing she said was, "I told you this would happen." Miki's face collapsed. She slept in silence, left 2 days later. They did not speak for another 5 years. When Aya confessed her regret to a monk, he asked, "Did you want to be her sister or her judge?" Aya wept, because in the moment that mattered most, she had chosen being right over being kind. The psychology of retrospective judgment. Cognitive psychologists call it hindsight bias, the tendency to overestimate our foresight after an event has occurred. I knew that deal would fail. I always thought she was lying. Of course he betrayed us. But often, this clarity only arrives after reality has confirmed our suspicion. We forget our own uncertainty. We inflate our wisdom, and we weaponize memory into a self-righteous narrative. This creates relational disconnection because the person suffering does not feel seen, only evaluated. What we lose when we're right. When "I told you so" becomes a habit, we lose compassion because we focus on our accuracy, not their pain. Trust because others learn that vulnerability will be met with criticism. Curiosity because we assume we already know everything. Intimacy because people don't see comfort from those who keep score. Growth because we stay frozen in old views rather than updating with humility. Being right is not wrong, but worshiping being right turns wisdom into arrogance. Zen teaching, let the river move on. A monk once asked his master, "Should I remind others when they ignore my advice?" The master pointed to the stream. Does the river wait for praise when it nourishes the roots? No, the monk said. Then why should you? The stream flows, nourishes, moves on. So too should guidance, without clinging, without scorekeeping. The need to be heard beneath the need to be right. Often, the phrase, "I told you so," masks a deeper ache, the pain of being ignored, the fear of not mattering, the desire to be trusted. Instead of saying, "That must be hard. I'm here now. Let me help you heal," we say, "See, I was right." But this wins no love, only distance. Healing happens when we validate the hurts, not our prediction. Practice shifting the response. Next time someone returns to you after not heeding your warning, try, "Thank you for trusting me with this now. I'm here and I care. What do you need right now? Would it help if I sat with you in this?" These responses hold space, not superiority. They build bridges, not pedestals. And over time, they make you a person others can turn to, not just when you're right, but when they're broken. The father who finally changed his words. Takashi was a father of 2 daughters. He prided himself on being a realist, a planner, a man who warned and protected. He often said to his children, "You'll regret that choice. I've seen this before. Don't come crying to me later." And when his older daughter dropped out of university, he said, "I warned you, but you never listen." She left home for 2 years. During that time, Takashi began attending Dharma talks. One evening, the teacher said, "To be wise is to be available, not accurate." Takashi wept. When his daughter returned, she waited nervously for his judgment. But he said only, "I'm sorry I cared more about being right than being your father. I'm listening now." She cried. Not because of her failure, but because, for the first time, her pain was not met with a lecture, but with love. Meditation. Loosening the grip on the past. Sit in silence. Recall a moment where you felt the urge, or gave in, to say, "I told you so." Breathe. Now ask, what did I need in that moment? Did I want to be heard, seen, acknowledged? Could I have expressed that need without diminishing the other? Visualize yourself speaking from wisdom without pride. And whisper internally, "Let the past guide, not govern." Breathe again. Final reflection. To give guidance is a gift. To be right is sometimes grace. But to cling to being right is a burden. It turns wisdom into weaponry, memory into manipulation. So speak not to prove your foresight, but to nurture connection in the present. Let your voice be the stream, flowing, nourishing, and gone. So that what remains is not, I told you so, but, I'm with you now. Part 5. I'm right. The roots of arrogance and the isolation of certainty. The disciple stood at the threshold of the hall, arms crossed, face tense. They keep arguing with me, he told the old teacher, but I know I'm right. The teacher didn't lift his gaze from the incense smoke curling in the air. After a long silence, he finally said, "Would you rather be correct in an empty room or kind in a full one?" The disciple blinked, and suddenly the silence felt heavier than any rebuke. The most addictive sentence. Of all the toxic forms of speech, I'm right is perhaps the most addictive. It strokes the ego, it offers certainty, it protects against shame, it insulates from vulnerability, it gives the illusion of control. But spiritual masters across centuries warn that the moment one becomes too certain, the path of growth begins to narrow. Because certainty is a wall, and behind that wall lives loneliness, stagnation, and unexamined bias. The spiritual pitfall of righteousness. In the early scriptures, the Buddha often warned against ditthi upadana, the clinging to views. Not just political or religious beliefs, but any position the mind clings to as an extension of identity. Even correct views, when clung to, become fetters. Why? Because they exclude the wisdom of others. Because they create division. Because they make us listen less and defend more. When I'm right becomes a reflex, we no longer seek truth. We seek confirmation. The story of the scholar and the stone. In ancient Silla, a brilliant monk scholar named Daijin was known for his debates. He could quote every scripture, win every argument, silence any challenger. One day, he met a wandering hermit who carried a single stone wrapped in cloth. "What do you know of the Dharma?" Daijin asked. The hermit said nothing. He simply handed him the stone. Daijin frowned. Is this a metaphor? A riddle? The hermit bowed and walked away. Years later, after losing his voice to illness, Daijin found the stone again. He realized the hermit had offered him presence, not proof, a truth beyond winning or losing. And he wept, for all the conversations he had won, but all the hearts he had lost. Psychological insight, certainty as defense. Modern psychologists see the need to be right as a form of ego preservation. It helps us feel safe. It shields against ambiguity. It validates our intelligence. It wards off feelings of inadequacy. People with high psychological rigidity often interrupt often, struggle with feedback, surround themselves with agreement, experience frequent frustration in relationships. Why? Because they equate agreement with love, and anything else becomes rejection. This is not confidence. This is armor built from fear. The karma of certainty. I'm right may win an argument, but it often loses the room. It turns dialogue into debate, curiosity into conflict, shared learning into a contest. Those who insist on being right eventually find themselves talking to themselves, because no one wants to build with someone who never lays down their own brick. Zen teaching. The cup that cannot be filled. A professor once visited a Zen master to learn about enlightenment. The master served tea. He poured until the cup overflowed, spilling onto the floor. "Stop, it's full," the professor cried. Exactly, said the master. You come full of your own ideas. How can I pour anything new? The need to be right is that full cup. There is no room for newness, no space for another's view, no soil for unexpected wisdom. The quiet freedom of maybe. In spiritual maturity, the most powerful sentence is not, I'm right. It is, maybe. Maybe I don't know everything. Maybe your view holds something I cannot see. Maybe truth is wider than I imagined. Maybe we're both right in different ways. Maybe what matters is connection, not correctness. This maybe is not weakness. It is the humility of the open mind. It is the beginning of compassion. The partner who chose softness. Nami and her husband Hiro often disagreed about parenting. She would say, "You're too strict." He would say, "You're too soft." Each tried to prove their way was best. One evening, after another argument, Hiro said, "Let's pretend we're both half right, and the truth is somewhere in the child we raised together." That sentence broke something open. From that day, their speech changed. Less defending, more asking. Less proving, more exploring. Their child, now grown, said once, "My parents didn't always agree, but they always met in the middle." Dismantling the tower. When you feel the urge to say, "I'm right," pause. Ask, what am I afraid of if I'm wrong? Am I listening or just waiting to respond? What part of their view might be valid? Can I say, "Tell me more," even when I disagree? Practice replacing. "That's wrong," to "I see it differently." "That's not true. What makes you feel that way?" "I know better. I've had a different experience." These phrases keep the door open to growth, to relationship, to peace. Meditation, softening certainty. Sit quietly. Visualize someone you've recently debated or judged. Now breathe. Whisper, "May I value understanding more than being right. May I be strong enough to listen without needing to win. May I open to truths I have not yet seen." Let the breath wash over the clenched parts of your mind. Let the exhale make space where opinions have hardened. And rest. Not in victory, but in presence. Final reflection. There is a kind of wisdom that does not need to shout. It leans in. It listens. It learns. When we release the need to be right, we regain freedom, connection, wonder. And in that openness, we discover truths we never imagined. Not because we won the argument, but because we dissolved the walls between hearts. So let the final word not be "I'm right." Let it be "I'm still learning." Chapter 3. Speech in Old Age. The Weight of Every Sound. Part 1. The Speech of the Elder. Light or shadow in the family. There is an old saying among the monks of Mount Hiei. The words of the old are like lanterns in the fog. Either they guide or they haunt. In a quiet village at the base of the mountain, an elder named Kenta lived with his daughter, her husband, and 2 grandchildren. He rarely raised his voice. He wasn't cruel, but the house, over time, grew heavy. Not with noise, but with words spoken carelessly by someone who believed age made him immune to reflection. Until the night his granddaughter asked softly at the dinner table, "Grandpa, why are you only gentle when strangers are around?" No one spoke for a long time. And in that silence, Kenta realized something. His words had not just aged, they had accumulated weight. The natural authority of the elder voice. In many traditional societies, the words of elders are sacred. They are repeated, memorized, framed in stories, passed to future generations. But in modern life, this reverence has two possible outcomes. It creates a voice of wisdom, gentleness, and memory, or it solidifies into a voice of judgment, bitterness, and rigidity. Because age brings experience, but not always insight. What gives elder speech power is not the number of years. It is the presence behind the words. The psychological truth: children remember tone. Child psychologists often say, children may forget what you did, but they will never forget how your voice made them feel. And as people age, their speech becomes more deeply etched into the memory of those around them. Why? Because children and grandchildren often assume that's who they truly are. They've had a lifetime to grow. They must mean it if they say it now. So when an elder says, "You'll never amount to anything. Why can't you be more like your brother? You're too sensitive. Back in my day, we weren't so weak." These words do not fade. They take root, and they become the internal voice of the younger generation. The story of the widow who forgot kindness. In Tokyo's outskirts lived a widow named Tomiko. She was known for her hard work, her punctuality, and her sharp tongue. Her daughter Mika and Mika's son moved in after a divorce. Tomiko never insulted them directly, but she left a trail of remarks. "You're still not married? A real woman keeps her family together. No wonder he left. This boy needs a father, not books." Mika never argued, but over time, her son began speaking less. He smiled less. He stopped drawing. One day, Tomiko found him tearing up his sketchbook and whispering, "Boys shouldn't dream." That night, Tomiko wept. Because those were her words, echoing in a child's self-destruction. And she had no idea they were listening so closely. Spiritual insight. Age requires more mindfulness, not less. Buddhism teaches that as we age, the karmic impact of our actions deepens. Not because the world listens more, but because our voice has traveled further. Our tone carries a history. Our words are heard not in isolation, but through the lens of everything we've been. Thus, an elder's voice is like a bell. It can ring with wisdom or clang with resentment. It can soothe or shame. It can offer refuge or remind others of their smallness. In Zen, the role of an elder is not to dominate. It is to tend the fire of continuity. The karma of unquestioned speech. Some elders say, "I've earned the right to speak my mind. I'm too old to change. They're just too sensitive. They'll understand when they're older." But these justifications are often rooted in unchecked wounds, regret, disappointment, bitterness, powerlessness. And when these are not examined, they spill into language. That is the true karma of speech in age. It reveals the unfinished business of the heart. The grandfather who chose softness late in life. Shoji was 78 when he moved in with his son's family. He had lived alone for years. He had little patience for noise, mess, or emotion. His grandchildren feared him, not because he hit them, but because he sighed when they entered the room. One evening, he overheard the youngest say, "Grandpa doesn't like us." He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he knelt beside the boy and said, "I don't know how to talk sweet. I was raised in silence. but I want to learn your language." The boy hugged him. They began reading together. And day by day, Shoji's tone softened, not perfectly, but honestly. By the time he passed, the grandchildren spoke of him not as the stern one, but as the man who learned to love us out loud. Practice speech inventory for elders. If you are an elder or approaching elderhood, ask, "What phrases do I say repeatedly at home? Do my words invite others to open or shut down? What childhood phrases still echo in me? Am I repeating them? Do I use age as a reason not to grow?" Now choose one sentence you often say that causes distance. Replace it with something kinder. Even a 5% shift in tone can alter the soul of a home. Meditation, the echo of my voice. Sit quietly. Visualize your children or younger relatives sitting in a circle around you. Now ask inwardly, what sentence do they most remember me saying? What tone do they associate with my presence? What words would I want them to repeat when I'm gone? Now breathe. Let any regret soften into willingness. Whisper, "May my voice be a lantern, not a shadow." Final reflection. To grow old is not a license to speak freely. It is a responsibility to speak wisely. Your words are no longer light feathers. They are stones, heavy, permanent, shaping rivers. You may never know which sentence will echo in your grandchildren's mind. So let it be one that nourishes, one that outlives your breath, one that says in its own way, "You are enough. I see you, and I am still becoming too." Part 2. The unconscious harm. When parents sow pain without realizing. A woman once came to a Zen master in tears. "My daughter avoids me," she said. "She says I hurt her, but I never raised my hand. I gave her everything. I don't understand." The master looked up and asked, "Do you remember the tree by the monastery gate?" "Yes," she replied, puzzled. He nodded. "Even when the wind is gentle, the tree remembers where the roots cracked. The wounds we don't intend still bleed." Most pain in families does not come from screaming. It comes from repetition. Not of violence, but of phrases said carelessly, routinely, under the banner of habit. "You're so slow." "Why are you like this?" "Don't be silly. You'll never understand." "Stop crying. You always ruin things." These words do not draw blood, but they draw doubt. And over time, that doubt becomes a child's self-image. The difference between abuse and impact. Psychologists today differentiate intent from impact. A parent may not intend to hurt. A grandparent may not mean to shame. An elder may not realize the weight of their tone. But still, the impact exists. Children, by nature, absorb everything. Their minds are porous, their hearts exposed. And the words of a parent or grandparent become the blueprint for self-talk in adulthood. The story of Yui and her silent father. Yui was raised by a father who never called her stupid. He never yelled. But whenever she shared something excitedly, he would blink, pause, and say, "That's not important." He didn't mean to harm. He believed he was teaching focus, toughness, simplicity. But years later, when Yui was offered a scholarship abroad, she declined. When asked why, she whispered, "I think my voice is a waste of space." She could not trace the origin of that belief, but her inner voice sounded eerily like her father's tone. The myth of tough love. Many parents believe in toughening up their children through criticism. They say, life is hard, they need to hear the truth. I'm preparing them for the real world. If I don't push them, they'll be weak. Better I say it than a stranger. But what often happens is not preparation, but pre-wounding. The child grows up defended instead of resilient. They associate love with discomfort. They believe achievement is the only way to be seen. And then they pass this pattern to their own children. Not because they're bad, but because no one interrupted the cycle. Zen insight. Karma is not only what you do. In Buddhist teachings, karma includes what is said, not said, done, and left undone. The Buddha once said, "Better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace." He did not say one truthful word. He said one word that brings peace. Because truth without awareness can become a weapon. And words, when repeated, become reality for the listener. The mother who didn't realize. Naoko was a single mother who worked 3 jobs. She loved her son, Rei, fiercely. She protected him, fed him, paid for his schooling. But she also said every week, "You have no idea how hard I work. Why can't you just behave? You make everything more difficult. I gave up everything for you." She didn't scream, she didn't hit. But Rei grew up burdened by invisible guilt. At 22, he wrote her a letter. "I know you love me, but I also know I was your exhaustion. And your words taught me that love is a weight people carry." Naoko cried for 3 days. Then she began therapy. And for the first time in her life, she learned to say, "You don't owe me anything. I want to learn how to love with freedom." Intergenerational echoes. Most elders don't create harm from malice. They simply speak what was once spoken to them. They say, "That's how I was raised. I turned out fine. Children these days are too soft." But repeating harm is not tradition. It is unconsciousness. The Zen path is not about blame. It is about awareness. Seeing clearly. What tone you inherited. What speech you normalized. What patterns you've carried forward, so that the chain can end with you. Practice. Listening to the echoes. Ask yourself, what phrases from my childhood still live inside me? Have I ever said them to others without noticing? What words did I most need to hear but didn't? Can I offer those words now, to others and to myself? Then choose one person in your life, child, sibling, partner, and tell them, "If I've ever spoken carelessly, I want to understand. I want my words to heal, not hurt." This is not confession. It is compassion. The power of repair. Many elders fear apologizing. They think it undermines authority. But in truth, repairing speech is the highest form of maturity. When a parent says, "I shouldn't have said that. I want to learn how to speak with more care. Tell me how I made you feel. Your emotions matter to me." They do not become smaller. They become sacred, because they show that love is more than sacrifice. It is humility in action. Meditation, the voice that lingers. Sit in stillness. Visualize a child you've raised, or someone you've influenced deeply. What voice did I leave in them? What memory of me lives in their nervous system? Now breathe. Whisper, "May my words cleanse, not cloud. May my tone soothe, not scar. May I become a voice of refuge. Feel the exhale carry away inherited harm, and inhale the courage to speak anew. Final reflection. We don't need to be perfect elders. We don't need spotless pasts. But we do need courage to reflect, to ask, to grow, to repair, because speech is not about authority. It is about how others feel in our presence. And the kindest legacy we can leave is not our wisdom, but our willingness to unlearn what no longer serves, so that those who come after us inherit something better, not just in what we gave, but in what we stopped saying. Part 3. Final Words and Eternal Echoes, the Power of Last Speech. It was a gray morning when the nurse entered room 206. The old woman had passed in her sleep. Beside her bed, on the small wooden table, was a folded piece of paper. It read, "I forgive you. Please forgive me. Tell May I always loved her, even when I couldn't say it." May, the granddaughter, held the paper hours later in trembling hands. And in that moment, 30 years of tension, silence, and misunderstanding melted into tears. The woman was gone, but her voice at last had found the right words, and it echoed in love. The weight of parting words. Of all the sentences we speak in a lifetime, few carry the karmic force of our last ones. Final words imprint deeply. They are repeated at funerals, whispered in memory, echoed across generations. Because in those last syllables, people search for meaning, closure, forgiveness, blessing. And yet many final words in families are rushed, avoided, muted by ego, clogged with regret. In Buddhist understanding, conscious speech at the moment of death is a form of liberation, not only for the dying, but for those left behind. The regret of the unspoken. A monk once said, "We are haunted not by what they said, but by what we never heard." A father never says, "I'm proud of you." A mother never says, "I'm sorry." A grandparent never says, "I understand." A sibling never says, "I forgive you." These silences become wounds that memory cannot close. And so we replay the final conversations, hoping to edit them in hindsight. But once breath has left the body, only echoes remain, and they either soothe or scar. The story of the brother who waited too long. Daiichi had not spoken to his older brother for 14 years. A dispute over inheritance, made worse by pride and relatives, left them estranged. He told himself, he should apologize first. He's too arrogant. It doesn't matter anymore. Until a call came from the hospital. His brother was dying. Daiichi arrived too late. The nurse handed him a notebook. Inside, "Tell Daiichi I kept every photo. I missed him. I'm sorry for what I said that day." Daiichi didn't cry immediately, but later that night, sitting in his brother's old room, he whispered to the empty chair, "Me too." It was forgiveness, delayed, and it would never be complete. Spiritual teaching. Speech at death is transmission. In Zen tradition, the last words of a master are revered. Not for their poetry, but for their clarity. Because death strips away pride, illusion, pretense. What remains is truth. This is why the Buddha's final instruction was, "All conditioned things are impermanent. Strive diligently." No flourish, no sentimentality. Just reality spoken from love. For ordinary people, final speech need not be profound, but it should be real. Even one sentence can become an anchor. I love you. I'm sorry. You were enough. Thank you. I release you. These phrases become emotional refuge for decades. Psychological insight, the last impression bias. Cognitive research shows that humans remember the end of experiences more than the middle. This is called the recency effect. It means, a parent may love deeply for years, but a cold final exchange can overshadow everything. A grandparent may be kind, but a deathbed insult can echo louder. A sibling's silence at the end may hurt more than childhood betrayal. In other words, the last words matter. Not because they erase the past, but because they become the lens through which the past is interpreted. The woman who rewrote her goodbye. Harumi had lived a full life, 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 2 countries. But in her final months, what haunted her was a fight with her youngest daughter. "We haven't spoken in years," she told her hospice counselor, "and I said such cruel things." The counselor asked, "What would you want her to hear if you had 1 minute?" Harumi wrote it down. "You were not a failure. You were a mirror, and I couldn't bear to look at myself. I'm sorry I made you carry my shame." The nurse mailed the letter. The daughter arrived the next morning, held her mother's hands, and whispered, "You don't have to say anything. I heard you." Harumi passed that evening, peacefully. Preparing the tongue before the end. You may not know when your final words will be, but you can speak as if they matter now. Each phone call, each bedtime, each reunion. Ask yourself, if this were my last sentence to them, would I regret it? Have I said what needs to be said? What am I afraid to speak, and why? Then take a deep breath and choose truth over habit, speaking the unspoken now. Sometimes we wait too long. We assume there will be time. But death is not always kind with calendars. So start now. Write a letter. Record a voice message. Say the sentence in person. Whisper it in prayer. Even if the relationship is broken, truth spoken from love still travels. Even if they never hear it, your own heart will. Meditation. Your voice at the threshold. Sit quietly. Imagine yourself at the end of life. Your loved ones are around you. Now ask, what is unsaid? What needs blessing? What can I let go of? Breathe. Then speak, aloud or within, "May my final words carry peace. May my voice, even in departure, guide those I love toward wholeness." Final reflection. The way we speak in our final days does not need to be grand. But it must be clean. Not perfect, but free from what does not need to be carried. Because those who stay behind will replay your final syllables. Let those syllables say, "You were seen. You mattered. You are free." So that long after your body is gone, your voice remains. Not as an echo of pain, but as a prayer that continues blooming in their silence. Part 4. The Story of Old Man Lum and His Granddaughter's Eyes. There was a village near the edge of the Red River Delta, where the mountains met the fog and time moved like drifting incense. In that village lived an old man named Lum. He was known for his silence. Not the still silence of monks, but the tight-lipped silence of someone who had said too much in earlier years, and now said too little. His back was bent like an old gate, his hands leathery and dry, but his eyes, still sharp, seemed to hold secrets no one dared to ask about. He lived with his son, his daughter-in-law, and his granddaughter, Lin. The house that held too many silences. The house was filled with small kindnesses and large silences. Lum never shouted, but he had a way of speaking that felt like wind on cold iron. Why do you walk like that? Stop crying, that's enough. In my day, we didn't complain. Why is this rice so soft? That boy will leave you, just wait. The words were not violent, but they were cutting, especially to Lin, who was just 9. She began walking more quietly. She stopped humming. She stopped telling him stories. And eventually, she stopped looking at him at all. The day of the ceremony. One afternoon, there was a family ceremony at the temple. Monks chanted. Children lit incense. Lum sat apart, watching the village move like a tide around him. Lin had been asked to recite a poem. She stood at the altar, hands shaking, voice barely above a whisper. Halfway through, she forgot her lines. The silence cracked the courtyard. She turned to her grandfather, seeking something, maybe just a gaze of support. But he looked away. Later, she sat alone behind the temple, wiping her face. Her mother found her, asked gently, "What happened?" And Lin replied, "When Grandpa looks at me, it's like I disappear." The awakening. That evening, Lum overheard the sentence. He said nothing, but something shifted. For days afterward, he watched Lin from a distance, saw her shoulders curled, her eyes lowered. He remembered the look in her face, so close to the one he had seen in a mirror decades ago. Because once, he too had been a child ignored. Once, his father had called him soft, useless, a burden. And Lum too had turned inward, replacing tears with silence, dreams with bitterness. He realized he had inherited not just pain, but the language of pain. And now, unknowingly, he had passed it on. The rain and the chair. A week later, it rained. Heavy, misty mountain rain that turned rooftops into drums. Lum took a wooden chair and placed it on the veranda. He called softly, "Lin." She didn't answer at first, but her mother nodded, and she came. He pointed to the chair beside him. They sat, just the two of them, watching the waterfall. Minutes passed. Then he said, voice quieter than she had ever heard, "When you forgot your poem, I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. My heart said go, my mouth said nothing, and my face lied." Lin blinked. He continued, "I never learned how to speak kindly. My father taught me silence. My army taught me orders. But I want to learn your language." She said nothing, but her shoulders relaxed. And after a while, she leaned her head gently against his arm. The healing begins. From that day, Lum changed. Not perfectly, not quickly, but visibly. He began saying things like, "That's beautiful, Lin. I'm glad you're here. Can you teach me that song? I was wrong yesterday. I'm trying." He began writing small notes on scrap paper, sometimes just one sentence. "You are not too loud. I just wasn't ready for joy." They would appear in her books, under her teacup, tucked into her sketchpad. Years later, when Lum passed away peacefully, Lum gave a eulogy. She said, "He was not a perfect man, but he changed his voice, and in doing so, he changed mine." The legacy of one shift. Lum's story is not uncommon. Many elders carry wounds, but few transform them. Because transformation requires 3 rare things: humility, to see one's patterns; courage to speak new words, even with trembling lips, consistency to repeat healing phrases until they become real. Lum didn't live forever, but he lived long enough to rewrite the echo he left in a child's heart. And that is what matters. Practice. The lantern chair. Set a chair by a window or in a quiet space. Invite someone younger, your child, niece, grandchild. Say nothing for the first few minutes. Then speak from heart. I want to understand you better. What do I say that hurts? What would you like to hear more? Can we learn each other's language? This is not a performance. It's a beginning. Even one honest sentence can melt generations of silence. Meditation. Seeing through their eyes. Sit quietly. Visualize yourself as seen through a younger loved one's eyes. Ask, what tone do they hear when I enter the room? What sentence of mine do they remember most? What would they most long to hear from me? Now whisper inwardly. May my words become bridges. May my tone become light. May I speak not from age, but from awakening. Final reflection. Old Man Lum is not just one man. He is the memory in all of us. That voice we inherited. That silence we feared. That chance we still have to speak differently. It is never too late. Not to write the note, to whisper the apology, to change the sentence. Because no matter how old the tree, its roots can still be warmed by sunlight. And no matter how many winters have passed, there is still time to say, I see you now, and I'm learning how to love aloud. Part 5. The Teaching. Wrap truth in compassion. On a misty morning in Lumbini, a disciple asked the Buddha, is it more important to speak the truth or to protect another's feelings? The Buddha replied, speak the truth, but wrap it in the cloth of kindness. Truth without compassion is a knife. Compassion without truth is a lie. The razor edge of righteousness. Elders often carry truth like a blade. They say, I'm just being honest. I say it like it is. They need to hear the truth. Don't take it personally. But truth, when flung without care, becomes cruelty. And cruelty, even when factual, does not enlighten. It cuts. Not all wounds heal, especially when the knife comes from someone we loved. The myth of brutal honesty. In modern speech, there is a mistaken virtue called brutal honesty. But brutality is not a form of virtue. It is a sign of emotional laziness. When we say, you look awful, you're not good enough, he'll never love you, why even try? You've always been this way. We may feel righteous, but we are not brave. We are simply failing to do the work of kindness. It is easy to say what is wrong. It is harder to say what is true without closing the other's heart. The wisdom of compassionate truth. In Buddhist ethics, right speech includes 4 qualities. Truthful, sakka, not lying. Beneficial, Theravāda, helping, not harming. Kind, metta, spoken from goodwill. Timely, kala, said when the listener is open to receive. If a sentence lacks any one of these, it may be truth, but it is not dharma. The Zen master does not blurt. He waits, watches, listens. Then, when the moment ripens, he offers one sentence. It is sharp, yet soft, firm, yet loving. That is the art. The story of the dying father. Kazuo had been estranged from his son Shin for 20 years. When he was diagnosed with terminal illness, he called Shin to visit. They sat in silence for an hour. Then Kazuo said, "I never knew how to love you. My father beat me. I thought if I didn't hit you, I was doing better. I didn't know that silence could also bruise." Shin's eyes filled. Then Kazuo added, "You didn't fail me. I failed to see you." That sentence, quiet, raw, without embellishment, changed everything. It wasn't just truth. It was truth wrapped in remorse, intention, and humanity. And it healed a lifetime. Speaking hard truths with soft hands. Sometimes we must speak difficult truths. A parent needs to change. A child is drifting. A partner is harming. A friend is self-deceiving. But the power is not in the truth itself. It is in the delivery. Instead of, "You're lazy. I see you struggling. Can we talk about it together? You're ruining things. I'm scared. I want us to grow through this. You're a failure. You've fallen, but I still believe in you." Truth does not have to be diluted. It only needs to be carried with care. The teaching, "Bok su thật trong lòng từ bi." There is a Vietnamese Zen saying often attributed to both monks and mothers. "Bok su thật trong lòng từ bi." Wrap the truth in compassion. Why? Because the truth is like salt. Alone, it burns. But dissolved in warm water, it can cleanse. Words are the same. They can purify or scar. The exercise. Rewriting the knife. Write down one sentence you've said or want to say that is true but painful. Now, rewrite it, keeping the essence but changing. The tone, the framing, the emotional foundation. Ask, am I saying this to help or to release my own frustration? Can this truth wait for a better moment? What's the most loving way to say this without losing its honesty? Now read the new version aloud. Feel the difference. This is the practice of truthful compassion. The monk and the tea bowl. A student once asked a Zen master, "How can I tell the truth without hurting others?" The master handed him a cracked tea bowl. "Is this broken?" the student asked. The master smiled. "Only if you see it that way." Then he added, "Tell people what you see, but show them how to hold it with care. That, too, is truth. And that, too, is teaching." Meditation. Honesty with love. Sit in stillness. Bring to mind someone you love but have struggled to communicate with. Visualize them seated in front of you. Now ask, what truth am I withholding out of fear? What truth have I spoken too harshly? Whisper silently. May I speak with truth and tenderness. May my honesty build, not burn. May my words be brave and kind. Breathe, and let the next conversation grow from this root. Final reflection. Speech in old age is not about volume. It is about resonance. You do not need to say much, but what you say must leave behind more than silence. It must leave clarity, gentleness, guidance, warmth. So let your voice become that rare thing, a truth people welcome, not because it flatters, but because it loves them enough to be soft. And in that love, you will speak not like someone who has aged, but like someone who has awakened. Part 1. Why our loved ones hurt the most by our words. There is an ancient koan from a Korean monastery. Why is it that the arrow from a stranger's bow barely scratches, but the same arrow in a mother's hand pierces the soul? The paradox of closeness. In the beginning, every child sees their family as the world. A parent's voice is the first sound of meaning. A sibling's laughter becomes memory. A grandparent's sigh sets the rhythm of the home. These voices become internalized. And so, when those voices turn sharp, even subtly, the wound is not external. It is identity deep. We are hurt not simply because of the words, but because we have built our sense of self upon those voices. The science of intimate wounding. Modern psychology explains this through attachment theory. Children form emotional blueprints from their early caregivers. They associate safety with voice tone, worthiness with praise or criticism, belonging with warmth or coldness. This means a dismissive comment from a father equals "I am invisible." A sarcastic remark from a sibling, love must be earned. A harsh scolding from a mother, affection is conditional. Even in adulthood, we respond to family words with childlike vulnerability. Because family is not just a relationship, it is an imprint. The story of Keen and his sister. Keen and his younger sister Mai were raised in a home filled with quiet pressure. Their father rarely raised his voice, but he carried disappointment like a scent. Keen grew up reserved. Mai grew up reactive. One day, in their 20s, during an argument, Keen said, "You've always been dramatic. That's why no one takes you seriously." It was a passing insult. He forgot it by evening. But Mai didn't. For years, she second-guessed her emotions. She stopped sharing in relationships. She questioned her confidence at work. 10 years later, when Keen apologized, she cried and said, "That sentence became my mirror." The spiritual view. Karma in the kitchen. Buddhism teaches that karma is created not only in temples and wars, but also in kitchens and living rooms. The Dalai Lama once said, "If you want to test your enlightenment, spend a week with your family." Why? Because family knows our buttons. They installed them. And in moments of frustration, our speech reverts to habit. "You never listen." "I'm tired of your nonsense." "You're just like your mother." "I can't deal with you right now." These phrases are not teachings. They are emotional shrapnel. And the home becomes a battlefield where no one intended war. Why the hurt lasts longer at home. When a colleague criticizes us, we shrug. When a friend mocks us, we laugh it off. But when a sibling says, "You've always been a disappointment," or a parent says, "Why can't you be like your cousin?" or a partner says, "I regret marrying you," those sentences don't land and leave. They embed. Because we are most open with family, and openness without mindfulness invites wounding. The family as a mirror temple. Zen masters speak of the home as the first monastery. It is where ego is first formed, compassion is first tested, patience is most needed, language is most casual, but most impactful. In this way, a family dinner becomes a Dharma hall. But we often forget. We speak casually. We don't pause. We let frustration lead the tongue. And then we ask, why are they so distant now? Why doesn't my child confide in me? Why is there so much tension? The answer is usually not history. It is language. The woman who changed her tongue. Madoka was a mother of 2 grown daughters. She loved them, but often criticized them without realizing. She would say, "You gained weight again? Still no boyfriend? Maybe you're just not trying hard enough." One day, her youngest stopped coming home. In therapy, Madoka said, "But I was just being honest." The therapist replied, "There is a difference between being honest and being helpful." Madoka was quiet. She began practicing what she called loving speech meditation. Every morning before speaking, she asked, "Will this sentence nourish? Would I say this to a stranger with the same tone?" Her older daughter said a year later, "Mom speaks like she's tending to a garden now." Practice the 2-second rule at home. Before speaking to a loved one, pause for 2 seconds. Ask, am I reacting or responding? Am I speaking to help or to release frustration? Is this how I want to be remembered? In the silence of those 2 seconds, you can change karma. Meditation, holding the family heart. Sit quietly. Visualize your family, not as they frustrate you, but as they were when they were children. See their fragility. Now ask, what do they long to hear from me? What wounds may my words have left? May my home be a temple of healing. May my words remember their weight. May I speak as one who knows love is sacred. Final reflection. We hurt those closest to us not because we mean to, but because we forget their hearts are closest to our voice. Speak at home must be sacred, not censored, but conscious. Because in the echo of our kitchen, hallway, bedroom, children build their self-worth, partners carry their peace, siblings form their stories. So let your next sentence at home be said not with impulse, but with intention. And over time, your house will not just be walls and roof. It will be a sanctuary where voices heal, not harm. Part 2. Expectation plus trust equals double the wound. One evening, a monk returned to the monastery after visiting his ailing father. His eyes were red, his silence louder than usual. The master asked, "Did he say something cruel?" The monk shook his head. "No, he only said, 'You never became what I hoped.'" The master bowed gently and said, "Some arrows do not need poison. Their flight alone pierces the soul." Why family wounds twice? When a stranger insults us, we may shrug. When a coworker disappoints us, we recover. But when a parent, sibling, or partner speaks harshly, it hurts with a multiplied pain. Why? Because family wounds combine two invisible forces. Expectation, you should have known better. Trust, I opened my heart to you. When these are broken, the pain is not just from what was said, it's from what we thought was safe. The formula of the deepest hurt. In psychological terms, emotional pain intensifies when expectation times vulnerability equals depth of wound. And nowhere are expectations higher and vulnerability deeper than in parent-child relationships, sibling bonds, long-term partnerships. This means a passing comment like, "You always disappoint me. That was stupid. I don't have time for this," can echo for decades. The story of Anne and her son. Anne was a devoted mother. She gave her life to raising her son Min, providing for him, encouraging his studies, attending every school performance. But Min was quiet, sensitive, easily wounded. One day, after a minor mistake, Anne, exhausted from work, said, "I worked this hard for you, and you can't even do this right?" She didn't mean it. She didn't even remember it a week later. But Min did. At 17, he stopped painting. At 19, he moved out without saying goodbye. At 30, he wrote her a letter. "You may not recall what you said, but I replayed it for 10 years, every time I tried to create. The danger of silent expectations. In family, much of the pain comes not from what is said, but from what is expected but unspoken. She should have defended me. He should know I'm hurting. They should call more often. They should just understand. When these expectations are unmet, they become resentments. And when resentments pile up, they leak out as sarcasm, passive aggression, coldness, dismissive speech. But the other person cannot see the root. They only hear the tone. And thus begins the spiral of misunderstood intentions and escalating wounds. Buddhist insight, clinging and pain. In the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha explains, "Where there is attachment, there is suffering." Family love, when infused with attachment to how things should be, becomes a trap. We expect gratitude, obedience, reciprocity, understanding. But love is not a debt. And when we speak from the bitterness of unfulfilled expectations, our words become instruments of control, not connection. The sibling who let go. Tomo and Rika were siblings, born only 2 years apart. Tomo worked hard, stayed close to home, supported their parents. Rika traveled, changed jobs often, and didn't call much. At every family gathering, Tomo would snap, "Nice of you to show up. Must be nice to live without responsibility. We're all working while you wander." Rika smiled politely. But one day, she said quietly, "Every time you speak to me, it feels like I have to pay rent for being different." Tomo was stunned. They talked for hours. And Tomo realized he wasn't angry that Rika was distant. He was hurt that she wasn't who he expected. When he let go of the version of her he had built in his mind, his words changed. And so did their bond. Practice, naming the expectation. When frustration rises toward a loved one, pause. Ask, what was I expecting from them? Did I tell them this expectation clearly? Was it fair or was it inherited? Can I release it or reframe it with compassion? Then choose to speak not from the pain of disappointment, but from the freedom of real relating. Meditation, hearing beneath the hurt. Sit in silence. Bring to mind someone whose words have hurt you deeply. Now ask, what expectation did I carry into that relationship? What trust did I place in their voice? Then shift perspectives. Imagine you are them. What pain might they carry? What expectations might they have had of you? Whisper inwardly, "May I release my grip on how they should be. May I speak from freedom, not frustration. May I hear with new ears." Final reflection. We hurt the ones we love most because we expect the most and trust the deepest. But expectation is not love, and trust, when cracked, must be repaired with conscious speech. Let your next words to your family come not from what they failed to be, but from the space where both of you can grow freely. Because in that space, words no longer carry the weight of betrayal, but the lightness of understanding. Part 3. 7 Sentences That Shatter the Home. There are no earthquakes louder than a slammed door, no thunder more lasting than a quiet insult, and no battlefield closer than the dinner table. In every home, speech builds or breaks, and more often than not, it is the small, familiar phrases, not the screams, that leave the deepest scars. 1. Why can't you even do this? Spoken often by frustrated parents, spouses, or siblings, this sentence may seem minor, but it slices through the heart of self-worth. It carries judgment, comparison, shame. The real message received? You are not enough. Over time, this sentence doesn't motivate improvement. It erodes courage. The person begins to avoid effort, fearing failure. Instead, try, what part of this is confusing? Can I support you in figuring it out? A soft question builds resilience more than a sharp accusation. 2. It's your fault I'm suffering. A weaponized sentence often said in emotional outbursts or manipulative cycles. It projects pain onto a scapegoat, usually someone vulnerable. A child, a partner, a sibling. It teaches the listener that love is conditional, tied to performance or obedience. This sentence fosters guilt, even in situations where guilt is misplaced. Over time, it plants the belief, my existence causes harm, which is the seed of depression. Instead, try, I'm struggling right now and I want to share, not blame. Let's talk about how this is affecting both of us. 3. You should know better. A sentence meant to correct often creates fear. It suggests, mistakes are not allowed. I expected more, and you failed. You disappointed me. For children, this can feel devastating. For adults, it reinforces shame loops that began in youth. The unspoken implication? You are behind. You are inadequate. Instead, try, let's look at what we can learn from this. I've made this mistake too. We'll figure it out together. 4. I'm done with you. A sentence said in heat, but its echoes freeze the soul. It signals abandonment, rejection, and the threat of love being revoked. Especially in families, this phrase can create trauma, as it cuts at the core of safety. Children hear this and begin living in emotional exile, even while still at home. Instead, try, I'm overwhelmed and need space to think. Let's pause. I care, but I need time to respond wisely. Boundaries are important, but they should be rooted in love, not rage. 5. You're just like, insert disliked person. Often said as a comparison. You're just like your father. You're turning into your mother. Exactly what your uncle used to do. This sentence does more than insult. It strips identity. It tells the listener, you're not your own person. You are a mistake repeating itself. It creates shame, not just for what they've done, but for who they are. Instead, try, I'm worried because I've seen this pattern before and I care about you. Let's break this cycle together. 6. Why are you so sensitive? A dismissal disguised as feedback. It implies that feeling is a flaw. It teaches children and partners alike that emotions are inconvenient, vulnerability is weakness, expression leads to rejection. Eventually, the listener stops expressing altogether, not because they're healed, but because they no longer feel safe. Instead, try, I see this is affecting you. Can you help me understand? Let's talk when you feel ready. 7. You'll never change. The most dangerous prophecy. Because it's not a statement, it's a verbal curse. It tells the listener, growth is impossible, your past is permanent, I've stopped believing in you. This kills the desire for effort. Because when no change is expected, why try? Instead, try, it's been hard to trust change, but I'm open to seeing it. I've been hurt before, but I want to believe in us. Even a flicker of faith rekindles the will to transform. The accumulation of micro wounds. These 7 phrases may not be shouted. They are often whispered, said offhandedly, thrown casually during stress. But repeated over months and years, they shape personality, create self-narratives, distort love into survival. This is verbal karma in the family system, and unless interrupted, it becomes legacy. Zen reflection. The tongue is a brush. A Zen master once said, "Each word is a brushstroke, and the home is a scroll." You may forget what you've said, but the canvas remembers. The question is, will your speech paint a garden or a wound? Practice healing one sentence a day. Over the next 7 days, reflect on each harmful phrase you've used or received. Each day, write it down. Ask where it came from. Rewrite it with compassion. Speak the new sentence aloud to yourself or the person if safe. You do not need to fix everything at once. One phrase at a time can unravel years of hurt. Meditation, washing the tongue. Sit quietly. Place your hand over your chest. Recall a sentence you wish you hadn't said. Now whisper, "I forgive the voice that was unconscious. I honor the voice that is waking up. May my future words heal where my old ones hurt." Feel the breath soften your throat. Feel your voice return, not just as sound, but as medicine. Final reflection. It is not too late. You are not your worst sentence, nor are your loved ones. Words hurt, but words also heal. With mindfulness, humility, and love, the home can become a sanctuary of safety, a wellspring of truth, a school for kindness. Let your next words be chosen like prayer. Because when we speak to family, we are not just speaking to minds. We are speaking to souls in formation. Part 4. The True Story. A Mother, 3 Words, and a Child's Silence. It began with 3 words. Simple, ordinary, spoken without thought. "You're too much." The girl who sparkled. Mai was born like sunlight, laughing, dancing, loud in her love. At 5, she painted rainbows on her bedroom walls. At 7, she organized puppet shows for the neighborhood. At 9, she wanted to be a singer, astronaut, and teacher simultaneously. Her father called her my spark. But her mother, Han, was quieter. Raised in a household of restraint and formality, Han admired composure. She feared chaos. She worried about judgment. So when Mai jumped on furniture, or sang too loud, or interrupted conversations, Han would exhale and say, "You're too much." It wasn't shouted. It was barely even firm. Sometimes it was laced with affection, like a sigh wrapped in a smile. But Mai heard it, over and over, and slowly something changed. When light starts to dim. By age 11, Mai stopped painting. She wrote songs in a notebook she didn't share. She raised her hand less in class. She avoided parties. When asked why she no longer performed in talent shows, she shrugged. "I don't want to be annoying." By 13, she spoke only when spoken to. By 15, she avoided mirrors. And at 16, when her teacher praised her short story in front of the class, she cried in the bathroom. Not from joy, but from the discomfort of being noticed. The world, she believed, would love her more if she shrunk. The mother who didn't know. Han, meanwhile, felt proud. Mai was now polite, quiet, easy to manage. But something gnawed at her. The light in her daughter's eyes had dulled. When Mai smiled, it was brief. When she laughed, she checked to see who was watching. When she spoke, she chose words like a soldier navigating a minefield. One night, Han overheard a phone call. Mai said to a friend, "I always feel like I'm bothering people by existing." Han froze. Those words echoed through her ribs like thunder. And for the first time, she wondered, where did she learn to feel like that? The mirror of the past. In therapy, Han revisited her own childhood. She remembered being told, "Don't show off," when she danced. Being told, "Tone it down," when she laughed. Being praised for being quiet at family events. She realized she had inherited a fear of being seen, and unknowingly passed it on. She hadn't silenced Mai to hurt her. She had done it to protect her from a world that had once mocked Han for being bright. But pain wrapped in protection is still pain. And words, even lovingly spoken, can carry the weight of an ancestor's shadow. The conversation that changed everything. Han sat with Mai on the porch one spring afternoon. They watched the wind stir the trees. Neither spoke for a while. Then Han said, "There's something I need to tell you, something I've only just understood." Mai looked up, cautious. "I used to say you were too much, over and over, and I thought I was helping you fit in, survive, be strong. But I see now, I was dimming you. Not because you were wrong, but because I didn't know how to handle your light." Mai's eyes welled. Han continued, "You are not too much. You were just more than I knew how to hold." They wept. And in that moment, Mai didn't become loud again. She became seen. And that was the beginning. The healing that takes time. Mai didn't transform overnight. She still hesitated to share her writing. She still flinched at compliments. But she also began painting again, one color at a time. She wrote a song about her silence. She hugged her mother without being asked. And Han? She practiced different phrases. "You shine so naturally." "I love your voice." "Thank you for letting me learn from you." Not out of guilt, but out of reverence. The lesson of 3 words. You're too much. That was all it took. 3 words repeated, not shouted, not cruel, just embedded. That's how speech works in families. Repetition becomes belief. Belief becomes identity. Identity becomes silence. But the beauty of language is this: just as words wound, words can awaken. 3 new words can begin the reversal. I was wrong. You are enough. Please forgive me. Practice your 3-word audit. Reflect on the phrases you most often say to loved ones. Write down the 3 most repeated. Are they shrinking or strengthening? Are they inherited or intentional? Do they match what your heart feels? Now choose 3 new ones. That uplift, that see, that guide. Begin with these today. Spoken sincerely, they will plant new roots. Meditation. Reclaiming the light. Sit quietly. Visualize the version of yourself that once felt too much, too loud, too sensitive, too expressive. Now whisper. You were never too much. You were simply more than others could handle. You are allowed to take up space. Let this mantra soften the memory. Let it loosen the throat. Let it restore the voice. Final reflection. A family's language is the climate of the soul. Some homes are sunny, some stormy, some overcast with silent pressure. But we can change the weather with one phrase, with one apology, with one breath before speaking. Let your words to your child, your partner, your sibling, your parent, be chosen with the same care you'd give a sacred gift. Because once spoken, they echo, not just in ears, but in identity. Part 5. Zen Saying. Speak as if you pour water for the thirsty. In a northern Vietnamese monastery, nestled among clouds and mossy stones, a calligraphy scroll hangs near the entrance of the family guest quarters. It reads, "Speak as if you pour water for the thirsty. Nói như giọt nước cho người đang khát." Visitors often pause before it. Some smile, some weep, because all of us at some point in life have been both, the one holding the pitcher and the one too parched to ask. Words as nourishment. The Zen metaphor is simple. Imagine someone has walked a long, dry road. Their lips are cracked, their eyes tired. They sit before you with empty hands. Now imagine offering them water. How would you pour? Gently, slowly, with attention, with reverence. You would not shout. You would not throw. You would not question their thirst. You would serve. This is how we are meant to speak to those we love. Speech as service. In Buddhism, speech is not just a tool. It is a form of dana, the Pali word for generosity. To speak kindly, patiently, and truthfully is to offer your presence as a gift. In family, this means speaking slowly when a child is confused, answering without sarcasm when a partner asks again, pausing before judging when an elder forgets, encouraging without rescuing, listening without waiting to correct. These are not small gestures. They are offerings of nourishment. The father and the orange peel. There is a story often told in Thai monasteries. A boy once asked his father for help peeling an orange. The father, tired from work, said, "You're old enough to do it yourself." The boy tried, but the peel was thick and his fingers clumsy. In frustration, he cried. The father, seeing this, softened. He knelt down, peeled the orange slowly, and said, "I'm sorry. I thought you wanted help with the fruit. I didn't realize you wanted help being seen." That night, the boy slept with the peel beside his bed, not the fruit, because it wasn't hunger he needed answered. It was belonging. Pouring with awareness. To pour water for the thirsty requires 3 forms of awareness. Awareness of the other's emptiness. What pain are they carrying? What are they afraid to ask for? Awareness of your own energy. Am I speaking from patience or projection? Am I reacting or responding? Awareness of timing. Is this the moment to speak or to simply stay present? When these 3 align, speech becomes medicine. The grandmother who learned to pour. Lan was 74. She lived with her daughter and teenage grandson, Vu. Vu was moody, quiet, and glued to headphones. Lan often said, "Kids today are hopeless. In my time, we respected our elders. He never says anything useful." One day, Vu came home with red eyes. Lan asked, "What's wrong?" in her usual flat tone. Vu shrugged. She snapped, "Why do you never talk?" He walked away. Later, Lan found one of his notebooks open on the table. Inside, a poem. Raw, honest, beautiful. She sat for hours, stunned. That night, she knocked on his door. He barely looked up. She said, gently, "Would you like to teach me how to write like you?" Vu blinked. It was the first time she had spoken to him like he had water worth pouring into. From that night on, their silence became shared space, not exile. What it means to quench thirst. Family thirst shows up in strange ways. A child who acts out, thirst for attention. A spouse who nags, thirst for connection. A sibling who brags, thirst for recognition. A parent who criticizes, thirst for control in a changing world. We often respond to these behaviors with resistance. But the Zen path asks, what are they truly thirsty for? Not what they say they want, but what they ache for beneath the words. To speak as if pouring water means to answer that ache, not just the question. Practice the empty cup. Each morning, picture every family member as a cup. Ask, are they full or depleted today? What fills them? How do I usually speak to their emptiness? Then choose one sentence today that acts as water. Not advice, not instruction, just something simple, warm, and real. I see how hard you're trying. Your presence matters to me. I missed you. Thank you for being patient. One drop is enough to start the healing. Meditation, becoming the pitcher. Sit in silence. Visualize someone in your family who has frustrated or hurt you. Now let that image soften. See them not as difficult, but as dry, thirsty for safety, thirsty for love. Now imagine yourself holding a pitcher of fresh water. Not words of control or critique, but of care. Inhale, exhale. Now whisper. May my voice nourish where theirs has cracked. May my speech be cool, not cold. May I pour only what heals. Final reflection. In family, we are surrounded by thirst. Not for perfection, but for acknowledgement. Not for fixing, but for presence. To speak as if you pour water is to remember. Everyone in the home is carrying something unseen. Your words may be their only drink today. Kindness is not an extra, it is oxygen. You need not solve every problem, but let your speech be gentle on the tongue, warm in the chest, and slow like tea at dawn. That alone is enough. That is Dharma. Chapter 5. Transformation. Clearing the Mind for Clear Speech. Part 1. Modern Science and the Nervous System of Speech. The Buddha once said, "Words shape the world, but first they shape the speaker." Long before psychology gave it a name, he understood. Speech is not separate from the body. It is a function of the mind, the breath, and the nervous system. Today, science confirms what ancient teachers intuited. Every word we say changes us biologically. The nervous system, where language begins. Before a word reaches the mouth, it passes through a system deeper than thought. The amygdala scans for threat. The prefrontal cortex decides meaning. The vagus nerve, the largest communication highway between brain and body, modulates the tone, breath, and heart rate associated with speech. When you're angry, your voice tightens. When you're scared, your tone shrinks. When you're calm, your words flow. Speech, then, is not just language. It is nervous system regulation made audible. The body's reaction to hurtful words. Neuroscientist Dr. Matthew Lieberman conducted studies showing the brain responds to verbal rejection or criticism the same way it responds to physical pain. A harsh word can spike cortisol, the stress hormone, tighten the chest, reduce immune function, increase heart rate, which means saying you're worthless to a child is not just emotional, it's physiological. You're shaping their body, not just their mood. The science of soothing speech. On the flip side, kind speech, Words of reassurance and safety activate the parasympathetic nervous system. This system slows the heart, deepens the breath, lowers inflammation, enhances digestion, regulates sleep. A calm voice saying, "I'm here with you," or "It's okay, we'll figure this out," can literally shift someone's internal chemistry. In Buddhism, this is known as metta vacha, speech imbued with loving-kindness. In science, it's vagal tone regulation. Both point to one truth: your voice changes the health of the people around you. The story of two brothers. Nam and Tone were twins, raised in the same house but worlds apart in temperament. Nam spoke calmly. Tone erupted easily. One summer, their mother fell ill. Nam sat beside her, reading poems, holding her hand. Tone, overwhelmed by fear, snapped at nurses, grew agitated with her silence. The night before she passed, she turned to both boys and whispered, "Your voices tell me who you are, but also who you could become." After her funeral, Tone took a vow. He began practicing breath-based speaking, training himself to pause, to soften his throat before replying. Within months, even his face changed. People said he looked lighter. Nam just smiled and said, "The voice shapes the soul." The power of self-talk. Science also shows that internal speech, the way we speak to ourselves, activates the same neural pathways as spoken language. Calling yourself stupid, a failure, hopeless, produces the same stress response as if someone else said it. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between voices. It only recognizes tone. This means your body believes your words, even if they're false. It adjusts your hormones, posture, energy accordingly. Buddhist insight. The tongue is a mirror. The Dhammapada says, "Speak only when your words are more beautiful than silence." But to do that, one must first purify the body that hosts the voice. If your breath is short, your speech will be sharp. If your thoughts are racing, your voice will stumble. If your body is calm, your words will carry peace. This is not magic. It is alignment. Practice the 4-breath rule. Before a difficult conversation, try this. Inhale slowly for 4 seconds. Hold the breath for 4 seconds. Exhale for 6 seconds. Repeat 4 times. As you do this, feel your shoulders drop, your chest loosen, your mind clear. Then speak. Not from the storm, but from the shore. Meditation. Harmonizing voice and breath. Sit quietly. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your breath rise and fall. Now whisper a short phrase 3 times. I speak from stillness. I speak from care. I speak to nourish. Notice how your tone changes when your body is soft. This is not performance. It is embodied speech. Final reflection. Speech is not just a social act. It is a biological transmission. Each word changes. The body that speaks, the body that hears, the space between them. You cannot control all conversations, but you can prepare your instrument, your breath, your intention, your tone. And in doing so, you turn your voice into a vessel, not of dominance, but of healing. Part 2. 5-step practice for mindful speech. The Buddha taught, before speaking, ask yourself, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? But in the heat of everyday life, When tension rises and breath shortens, we often forget. So we speak too soon, or too late, or too loudly, or not at all. To bridge this gap between wisdom and reflex, we need practice. Not theory, not guilt, but a method we can return to, daily, softly, like breath itself. Introducing the 5 steps. The practice below is designed for modern life, but rooted in ancient insight. It requires no special setting, no rituals, just your presence. You can use it before a conversation, during a moment of rising emotion, after you've said something you regret. These 5 steps are not rigid rules. They are pauses of consciousness, like placing a lotus between your mouth and your heart. Step 1. Anchor. Feel the breath. Before speaking, feel one full inhale and exhale. Let your awareness rest on the body. Feel the chest rise, the shoulders settle, the air pass the throat. This anchors you in the present. It breaks the automatic loop of reaction. If needed, repeat. Breathing in, I ground. Breathing out, I soften. This shortens the distance between your nervous system and your intention. Step 2. Name. Identify the impulse. Ask silently, what am I feeling? What do I want to say? Why do I want to say it? Are you angry, tired, lonely, trying to defend yourself, looking to control someone? Just naming the impulse weakens its hold. You move from being inside the storm to being the observer of clouds. This naming isn't judgment, it's liberation. Step 3. Frame. Reconnect to intention. Now ask, what is my highest intention here? Examples: to be heard, to help them feel safe, to express a boundary, to clarify something, to repair a rupture. Let the intention rise above the impulse. Imagine speaking not from your frustration, but from your future self who has already grown through this moment. This reframes the tone of your speech before it even begins. Step 4. Shape. Choose the delivery. Now craft the sentence in your heart first. Ask, can I say this more gently? Can I use fewer words? Would I say this to someone I revere? Avoid these forms. Blame disguised as honesty. Sarcasm disguised as humor. Withdrawal disguised as silence. Control disguised as concern. Instead, speak as one offering something fragile across a bridge. Here is how I feel. Here is what I see. Here is what I hope. Step 5. Release. Let go of control. Once spoken, let the words go. You cannot control their reaction, their interpretation, their emotion. You can only offer your clarity and care. Release attachment to outcome. Let the words be a seed. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes years. But a seed spoken with love never truly dies. The story of Aki and the 5 steps. Aki was a nurse caring for her aging father, who had grown bitter and cold after a stroke. Each day he would complain, "You don't do enough. You forgot again. You never listen." Aki, overwhelmed, once snapped, "Maybe I wouldn't forget if I wasn't doing everything alone." Her father stared at her, silent, then turned away. That night, Aki practiced the 5 steps. The next morning, she knelt by his bed. She took a breath, anchored. Then she said, "I'm feeling overwhelmed, but my intention is to love you well. I want to listen and be heard. Can we try again today?" He didn't answer immediately, but his tone softened that afternoon, and the next week he asked for her favorite childhood story. A bridge had begun to rebuild, integrating the practice into daily life. You don't need to master all 5 steps at once. Begin with one. Perhaps just pause to feel the breath, or just name your emotion, or just soften your tone. Over time, these micro-pauses become muscle memory, and suddenly you find yourself speaking slower, listening deeper, apologizing sooner, loving clearer. Practice the 5-step journal. Each evening, reflect. One moment I used the steps. Blank. What I noticed in my body. Blank. What changed in the outcome. Blank. What I want to try tomorrow. Blank. This creates a cycle of gentle self-accountability, not shame. Progress is not linear, but it is real. Meditation. Speaking from the still lake. Sit in silence. Imagine your body as a still lake. Your emotions are ripples. Your breath, the wind. Your voice, the water flowing outward. Now whisper inwardly. May my words come from the stillness, not from the splash. May I speak not to defend, but to connect. May my mouth become a temple, and my voice a prayer. Let the silence teach you your next sentence. Final reflection. Speech is not just what you say. It's where you say it from. Each breath, each pause, each conscious phrase is an act of rebellion against violence, both within and without. The 5-step practice is not about perfection. It is about presence. Because with each mindful word, you build a world more compassionate, more awake, more whole, one conversation at a time. Part 3. The story of the man who swore, then healed with blessings. In the heart of a crowded Vietnamese alleyway where motorbikes buzz like bees and laundry hung from rooftops lived a man named Bao. People called him Bao Chui, Bao the cursed, Bao the mouth. Because every sentence he spoke was laced with venom. You blind idiot! Move, you cow! Useless trash, all of you! Even children flinched at his voice. Vendors went silent when he passed. No one remembered when he started swearing, but everyone remembered when it got worse. The anger behind the voice. Bao hadn't always been like that. He once worked as a teacher, quiet, gentle, respected. But life unraveled. A son lost to cancer. A divorce that hollowed his home. A job lost to automation. One by one, the lights went out inside him. And in the silence that followed, rage took root. Not the loud, flaring kind, but the slow burning kind that turned speech into poison. When people looked at Bao, they didn't see grief. They saw a foul-mouthed man and crossed the street. The stranger who didn't flinch. One day, as Bao sat at a tea stall, mumbling curses at no one in particular, an old monk approached. The monk bowed. Bao growled, "What are you staring at, bald head?" The monk smiled, then said gently, "I see your tongue is tired of carrying your pain." Bao blinked. The monk continued, "You speak as if your throat is burning. Come visit me when you're ready to drink something cool." And he walked away. Bao laughed bitterly. But that night, those words echoed. Your throat is burning. Something cool. The first visit. A week later, Bao stood outside the monastery gates. He didn't know why. The monk welcomed him with tea. They sat in silence. Finally, Bao muttered, "I can't stop swearing. I hate everyone. I don't know how else to speak." The monk nodded. "Then let's not start with speaking. Let's start with breathing." Each morning, Bao returned, not to pray, not to chant, just to breathe. The monk never corrected him, never judged his outbursts, only reminded, breathe before words. Let breath polish the mouth like river stones. The practice of one word. After a month, the monk gave Bao a task. Choose one kind word, just one. Say it aloud every morning, even if you don't mean it yet. Bao scoffed, but chose bless. So each morning he whispered, bless, over and over, even when angry, even through gritted teeth. Some days it felt ridiculous. Other days it felt like rain after drought. The shift. One afternoon, as Bao passed a group of kids, one dropped their toy. Instinct screamed, "Watch it, stupid!" But instead, Bao inhaled, exhaled, and mumbled, "Bless your hands." The boy looked up, startled, then smiled. Bao felt something warm in his throat. He didn't name it, but it stayed. The new reputation. Months passed. Bao began saying things like, "May your day be easy. Walk safely. Take care of your mother." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't poetic. But it was gentle. The neighborhood changed its name for him. From Bao Che to Ung Bao Chuk, Bao the Blesser. Even strangers paused to hear his parting words. The blessings that healed him. The monk once asked Bao, "What changed you?" Bao sipped his tea, then said, "I wanted to stop hurting people, but I stayed because the blessings healed me too." He touched his throat. Each kind word soothed something raw inside, like cool water on a wound I'd forgotten was there. Buddhist insight, the karma of tone. Buddhism teaches that karma is not just action, it is tone. A sharp sentence, even with good content, creates negative karma. A soft sentence, even if firm, can plant seeds of peace. Bao didn't change through theology, he changed through tone therapy. And so can we. Practice your word of the day. Each morning, choose a single word you wish to embody. Peace, clarity, care, grace, hope. Whisper it 10 times. Let it shape your tone, even in difficult conversations. Return to it when triggered. This is how Bao changed, one syllable at a time. Meditation, cooling the throat. Sit in silence. Place your hand gently on your throat. Inhale through the nose. Exhale slowly through the mouth. As you exhale, whisper, bless, or soft, or heal. Feel the vibration soften your voice box. Imagine past curses melting away, like snow beneath spring sun. Final reflection. You are not your worst sentence, nor are you bound to your old tone. Like Bao, you can bless where you once bruised. You can soften what once stabbed. You can become, over time, the quiet at the center of the storm, the breeze after the fire, the one whose voice heals the very room they enter. This is not fantasy. It is practice. It is breath. It is you returning. Part 4. Zen saying, breathe with compassion before speaking. In the northern hills of Kyoto, beside a stream whose water ran so still it mirrored the moon, lived an aging Zen calligrapher named Shun. Visitors often asked him how his writing remained steady, even as his hands trembled with age. He would smile and point to a small inscription above his writing bench. Breathe with compassion before speaking. Thở với lòng từ trước khi mở lời. The art behind the ink. Master Shun was known for painting the same phrase over and over. Peace in the pause. Say less, love more. Your breath is wiser than your tongue. He said he wasn't writing to teach. He was writing to remind himself. Because as he aged, he realized every word that caused harm began with a moment when he forgot to breathe. Why breath comes first. Modern neuroscience agrees. When we inhale consciously, even for 3 seconds, we activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for empathy, decision-making, and awareness. When we speak without breathing, we often speak from fear, amygdala, from habit, limbic memory, from ego, protective control. But when we speak with breath, we create a moment of regulation, reflection, intention. In other words, breath slows the trigger and clears the mirror. The power of the sacred pause. Breath before speech is not delay. It is discernment. It is the space in which a scream becomes a sigh, a complaint becomes a confession, a judgment becomes a curiosity. The Buddha called this sammavaca, right speech. But even before that, he practiced sammasati, right mindfulness. And the bridge between them? Breath. The story of Q and the letter she never sent. Q was a school principal in Hue. One day, she discovered that her assistant had mishandled school funds. Furious, betrayed, and disappointed, she wrote a letter. Sharp, precise, cold. Each sentence was a blade. Each word carved from fury. Before mailing it, she sat at her shrine to chant. As she lit incense, she remembered her late mother saying, "Always breathe with compassion before setting fire." She inhaled, paused. Read the letter again. Tears came, not for her pain, but for the fear in the assistant's handwriting. She rewrote the letter. Same message, different tone. The assistant cried when she read it and confessed everything. They rebuilt trust. Not because the truth changed, but because the breath softened the truth's arrival. Zen insight. Compassion is the carrier. In Zen practice, compassion, metta, is not softness. It is precision with care. Speaking compassionately doesn't mean avoiding truth. It means choosing the right time, honoring the dignity of the listener, grounding in your own clarity, holding the other person as a mirror, not a target. This is not about being nice. It's about being free from reactivity, so that your words carry less heat and more humanity. 3-second breath ritual. Before any emotionally charged conversation, silently count. 1. Inhale. 2. Hold. 3. Exhale. Then ask yourself, what am I protecting? What do I hope this person hears? What would I want to hear if I were them? Only then begin to speak. This transforms the voice into a path of presence. The grandfather and the storm. A boy once asked his grandfather, "Why do you wait before you answer people who upset you?" The old man picked up a bowl of cloudy water, stirred by his walking stick. "Would you drink this now?" The boy shook his head. They waited. The water stilled. The dirt settled. "Now would you drink?" The boy nodded. "That's why I breathe," said the grandfather, "to let my words come from still water." Practice. Speak from the exhale. Today, try this. Before every important sentence, speak only after the exhale. Let your body empty first. Let your tone drop a note lower. Let your eyes soften. Even if the sentence is direct, "I'm upset," "I need space," "I disagree," you will feel it land without bruising. This is how breath transforms even the hardest truth. Meditation, compassion at the lips. Sit in stillness. Close your eyes. Bring your awareness to the point just behind your lips. Feel your breath arrive there. Now whisper silently, "May my words be warm. May my words be wise. May my breath carry compassion to every sentence." Repeat as needed. Let the space behind your lips soften. Let the silence before speech deepen. Let your next words come from lightness, not from your wound. Final reflection. You may not remember every sentence you've spoken, but others do. And more than the words, they remember the tone, the timing, the feeling you left behind. So begin again. Each breath a rehearsal for compassion. Each silence a sanctuary. Each conversation a chance to practice sacred speech. Because in a world of noise, a voice that breathes before speaking becomes a balm and a beacon. Part 5. Guided Meditation. Breath, Speech, and Inner Listening. Let us now enter silence. Not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of returning. Returning to yourself. Returning to your voice, not as weapon, not as mask, but as mirror and as healing wind. Find a quiet place. Sit or lie down, spine long but gentle. Let the shoulders drop, the jaw soften. Let the belly rise and fall. Let the body become a garden, and let breath be the breeze. Phase 1. Anchoring in breath. Begin by placing your attention at the tip of the nose. Notice the coolness as air enters. Notice the warmth as it leaves. No need to control anything. Just receive. Inhale gently. Exhale slowly. Let's count together. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Pause. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again. Inhale. 1, 2, 3. Pause. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. With each breath, feel yourself settle into the moment. Let the outer world fade. Let the noise of thoughts soften like mist on a mountain. Phase 2. Scanning the voice within. Now, bring your awareness to your throat. Do not judge, just notice. Is there tension there? Is there heat or tightness? Is there a memory waiting to rise? Breathe into the throat, as if your breath were a warm towel softening the muscles. Now, silently ask yourself, what words have I carried that never belonged to me? Wait. Let something arise. It might be a harsh name you were called, a sentence that still echoes years later, a tone that taught you to fear your own voice. Let it come. Feel it. Then say silently, I release this from my body. It is not mine to hold. Breathe deeply and let go. Phase 3. recalling the words you've given. Now bring to mind a time when you said something that caused harm. You don't need to drown in shame. Just observe. Picture the moment. See your face. Hear the sentence. Now ask, what was I really trying to say underneath the words? Perhaps, I was scared. I felt invisible. I needed love. Let that truth arise. Say silently, I forgive the voice that did not yet know how to speak love. Let the breath answer that space. Phase 4. Planting the new speech. Now bring one hand to your heart, one hand to your belly. Inhale into both. Imagine that with each breath, you are planting new words inside you. Words of calm, words of courage, words that carry healing. Now whisper silently or aloud if you feel ready. May my words serve peace. May my voice honor truth. May I speak only what my heart can carry with grace. Pause between each line. Let the words vibrate through your ribs, your spine, your lungs. This is the new language taking root. Phase 5. Listening from the soul. Now imagine someone you love, perhaps someone who challenges you. See their face. Let them sit across from you in your mind. Now, ask silently, what are they longing to hear? Not to flatter them, not to manipulate, but to reach their humanity. Listen. Then offer them one simple phrase. I see you. I want to understand. You are safe with me. I am learning to love better. Breathe with them. Let silence hold the rest. Closing the practice. Now take 3 deep breaths. Inhale peace. Exhale all tension. Inhale presence. Exhale the past. Inhale light. Exhale with a gentle smile. Let your face soften. Let your hands open. And when you are ready, slowly return back into this moment. But now quieter inside, more rooted, more tender, more awake to the power you carry behind your lips. Final reflection. The sacred thread, woven daily, in kitchens, in bedrooms, in workplaces, in silence. It can strangle, or it can stitch broken hearts together. It is not just sound. It is a reflection of your presence. You have now walked through the 5 chapters of this journey, from the roots of karma, to the voices of ignorance, to the gravity of aging speech, to the intimacy of family wounds, to the breath of transformation. And now you return to life, not to speak more, but to speak with more meaning. A blessing for your voice. As you step back into your world, carry this blessing. May my tongue be a bridge, not a blade. May my breath cool the fire of reactivity. May my speech bring comfort where there was silence, clarity where there was confusion, and healing where there was harm. May my voice remember the sacredness of sound. And in each conversation to come, may you feel the breath arrive, the pause open, the words fall, like soft rain on thirsty ground. You've stayed until the end, not just through words, but through stillness, through feeling, through something deeper than understanding. If even one story touched a quiet part of you, if one sentence stayed behind, lingering like incense after the flame, then this journey was already enough. But healing grows in circles. So if these stories offered you space to breathe, to remember, to begin again, we invite you. Leave a comment below, not just for us, but for someone who may be reading, searching for what you've just found. Share this with a friend whose heart may be tired. And if you feel called, subscribe, so that each time you return, the boat will be here, still, empty, waiting. Thank you for listening. Thank you for remembering. This is the empty boat. Until next time, breathe gently.